Oh my gosh. Somebody mentioned the rabbit hole. It is. You just-
I know I didn't want to start.
Oh my gosh.
God bless them.
Finally went to like a couple of slots.
Something like that. It's so impressive. I'd be like,
Can't imagine. Oh, yeah, it's live.
Really slow.
amazing.
That's what I'm sitting by.
Yes.
Thanks.
I heard that. I think.
It's popular now that
I mean, I've done it 3 times. I'm doing it for a week. A lot of people. I know a lot of
First time I met her. COVID baby. Not around a lot of people. So like, Max, his first cousins and then us. Every phase, she just started crying. She first, like, you know, she just started crying because she hadn't seen it. So just her grandma and her. Yeah, so I think actually it's close. Same thing. Her baby was born.
That's right, you just described it, much smaller.
Nice. Yeah. I was pretty.
See, those are the effects of North Carolina.
They get used to it, but at first they'll.
Right after I trim it, that day, I was how much.
The only way we gotta do is stay quiet. Kids TV show.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Oh, no, I. I'm years old.
Good prices.
Blackout season right now.
Yeah. Crossbow. Was busy, but.
I don't know one I've had a regular compound. Those things are like, they're extremely accurate.
Yeah.
Right.
That's awesome. I'm sure she was excited.
That was her first one.
That's a good way.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
Yeah.
You still hard.
I like seeing young kids get up there and do stuff like that.
Yeah, their dad keeps some.
Everything. Then.
So much, you know, all the kids nowadays are sitting here on their phones, there's a whole lot of stuff to do out
Yeah, we make her, let's kiss the first fish that they catch each year and throw it back.
there. Hopefully we get enough ice this year that's exploding ice fishing out here.
Yeah.
3 years ago, we were catching perch down off Roaring Brook.
Really?
Buckets full.
Gee.
Oh, that's when that big line was on.
I need more chair.
I drive through there every month. So that line just keep
We go down right about 4 o'clock.
The wind. That wind.
The wind dies down. I've never heard of that.
And the snow fell.
Somebody here. Just amazed. Every day.
Oh, really?
I'm always, stop watching Bobby Cotton.
So if we had more of this, we'd have less static.
My cousin.
Said they did it because the recommendation.
All right, everybody, it's 7 o'clock. I'd like to call this meeting to order. I'll rise for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Much.
John Leo,
Here.
John Cups, Al Dyka. Here. Nancy Rondell.
Here.
And Matt Bobera.
Here.
We do have a quorum.
Excellent. All right, citizens comment. Anyone have citizens comment tonight? Yes.
Rebecca back, it's 500 West Summit. Number one, Victor, could you blow that up? Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. Couple of things, the tree lighting, the tree is gorgeous, and the open house on Saturday. I was wondering why they are open to the public versus where it used to be. I remember years and years ago, it was tree lighting was on Sunday night and open house was like during the week. So it was just us girls that would, residents that would go to it. Now it's open to the public and it's, I don't know, we do everything else for the general public, that I always thought the tree lighting and the open house was kind of like just ours. That's number one. Number two, surveys. When you put surveys out on the Facebook, I don't belong to any social media on purpose. So are the surveys open to the public? Anybody can vote or say, I want this or I want that, or?
Yeah.
Okay. Not just.
Not just social media, put on the website. Depends on what survey. We haven't put out a survey in a while, so.
Okay. So that makes a difference. The I want versus what we can afford. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And the tree lighting got hijacked by the Chamber of Commerce 5 or 6 years ago before Bonnie started. And they turned it into a everyone event instead of just a town event. So
I know, and it should, I kind of thought that the chamber took it over. But if they go back and look at what Petoskey does on a Friday night, so it's just.
Petoskey's tree lighting is on Friday at their open house. So they merged the two, and that is for sure not just Petoskey.
Correct.
That is very open, so.
Well, but it's, we used to go to it, we would have to leave early from work to get there for Friday night. Whereas if it's on Saturday, everybody's here. Visitors, so, I don't know, we just do a lot for the visitors and
Yeah,
just beyond it.
I was on the council when we changed it and gave the event to the chamber. And the reason it was changed from Sunday to Saturday is at the request of many people here in town. These college kids came home for Thanksgiving Day and they wanted to take part in the tree lighting. They had, when they were younger, they wanted to be part of it, not when they were home for the holiday. So we moved it to Saturday so that before the college kids went back down to school, they could take part in that. So that's the reason it was switched. And it was at the request of many, many parents and families here in town.
And the same with the open house?
I don't know about the open house. I don't think that was ever a city deal. I think that was always a chamber deal, or the merchants by themselves.
I'm Bonnie Culp, I'm the executive director of the chamber. And for as long as I've come here, it's been a back-to-back event. Friday night in Petoskey, Saturday night in Harbor. I don't know the history. I'd love to hear if there's more history, but I'm wondering if maybe you're confused with ladies' weekend and open house. Okay. I don't know of open house having ever been on a day other than the
It used to be
Saturday.
like Wednesday or something, because we could never go to it, because we didn't live here. We were.
But so that's all I know.
So it was special when we finally moved here. It was like, wow, we can go to open house. Be a local.
I'm curious, how do you propose keeping people out who don't live here? I mean, I think that would be really interesting.
No, I don't.
You gotta stop them on the road and ask for their license.
No, but if it's on Wednesday, then the visitors that are here for the weekend skiing or whatever, they're not here.
I didn't think there were that many people downtown, actually.
All right,
It
no,
was.
you guys can talk about this later.
Yeah.
That was my comment.
All right, anyone else have any citizens comment this evening?
Well, I hate those gas leaf blowers. I think the city should do something about those. And, you know, a lot of cities are changing now and you have to be electric.
That's
I
right.
mean, we wouldn't be the first one to do that. So planting a seed.
Yeah.
They're awfully noisy.
They work well. All right, anybody else? Once, twice, thrice? Good. Anything on the computer, Victor?
No comments.
Excellent. So we can move right into the consent agenda. Objections from the table?
I'd make a motion that we
Yes. If there's any objections from the gallery tonight on the consent agenda? No, that-
now my motion. I propose a move that we accept the consent agenda.
A second. Nancy Rondell,
Yes.
John Cups, John Leo. Yes. Al Leka,
Yes.
Matt Bavira.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Excellent. Move into the meat of the meeting.
All right, the first thing on our agenda is a DDA update to council on status of specific DDA projects, as well as the DDA's financial position. Margaret Moose, DDA Director, will be presenting on that.
Good evening. I am here on behalf of the Harbor Springs DDA tonight to give you an update on where we stand in 2021 as far as financially and the projects that we've addressed. Go on to the first slide. just for a little history, the Harbor Springs Downtown Development Authority was created in 2012 by Ordinance 180 of the Harbor Springs City Council, and said ordinance and the Downtown Development Authority Act being Act number 197 of the Public Act of 1975. I can go on. The Harbor Springs DDA developed a taxable increment financing plan in 2015, which ran through 2017. The TIF plan was then renewed for 2018 through 2022. A TIF development plan describes the costs, locations, resources for the implementation of the public improvements that are projected to take place in the DDA district. Financing options for DDA's activities include tax increment financing. A community can capture property taxes which would have otherwise been paid to entities such as the community college and county. Millage, up to 2 mills for municipalities with population of less than 1 million, up to 1 mill for municipalities with population over 1 million. Special assessments, revenue bonds, revenues from property owned or leased by the DDA, donations and grants to the authority, or contributions from the local unit of government. So those are the options that we have as a DDA. Currently, the Harbor Springs DDA revenue is comprised of special assessment, that is assessment on property owners in the Central Business District, which totals $45,900. Our TIF capture revenue, which is $43,703, expected for 2021. Our taxing authorities include Harbor Springs City, North Central Michigan College, and Lakeview Cemetery. This does not include the county TIF capture, which should be paid in, but does not, but the county has not been paying any of that. Our other income is event income. And as I noted at the bottom, Harbor Springs City, the TIF capture makes up approximately $30,000 to $35,000 of the nearly $100,000 DDA revenue. So, you can, so you can see the breakdown on the expected TIF capture in the highlighted area. The 21,000 from Emmett County is the amount of the TIF capture that the county does not pay in at this point. The next line item is the city of Harbor Springs, the cemetery, and then North Central Community Colleges. That's the TIF capture from those entities. Where do we stand in 2021? With $41,000, $700 for in the TIF, the $45,900, and the $8,500 from special events. The $100,000 general transfer was for the downtown tree grate project, which would now be zeroed out this year. So that's not, our expenditures were $35,100, wages, Ice Fest expenditures, and other projects. So that is leaving us at this point with a fund balance, expected fund balance, ending around, once you deduct wages through the end of the year, just over $100,000. Just for a little comparison of how we are compared to some of our neighboring cities. The Harbor Springs DDA total revenue is around $100,200. You can see from Charlevoix, their total revenue is $574,000 over Wayne City, $387,469. East Jordan, even at $240,348, and St. Ignace being at $206,000. Most of that's reflected because they have a lot longer standing DDAs, and ours was just resurrected in 2012. So when the TIF plan was amended and renewed in 2018 through 2022, there was a series of projects on that TIF plan. And so this is just kind of where we stand. In those, the first, there was the wayfinding that the DDA implemented and completed in 2019. We continue to update those, the downtown directory kiosks. They were just resurfaced this year since we did have a big change in turnover with businesses. The next item was a waterfront beautification project would be implemented that addresses waterfront aesthetics public waterfront access and facilities for recreation. That's still in progress. In 2020, we were able to raise funds through the DDA for the picnic tables down in Marina Park and have continued to assist with the Marina Park improvements that were made this year. The next item on the plan was an existing vacant lot owned by the city of Harbor Springs located at Third and String Streets, and that would be developed as a public parking lot, and it was paved and 20 to 25 spaces were created. The next item on the list was the Merchants Walkway. Will be improved landscape maintenance, repair, or replacement of brick pavers, and we are in progress with that, assessing the needs and the costs as we go into 2022. The next item in the plan was the downtown holiday lighting would be improved or replaced, and that is in progress. In 3rd Street, the holiday lighting was implemented in 2018. We continue to still add more trees and light those. Even this year, we had an accident and one tree came down, and we're adding lights to the neighboring tree next to it. So that is an ongoing project for us. Improvement or replacement of downtown street lighting that would be implemented for energy efficiency and dark sky compliance and aesthetics. And that is currently a DDA project, again, as we head into 2022. And I'll address that in a little bit. Another line item that the DDA was hoping to accomplish in their plan was to provide administrative services for the Downtown Development Authority, updating plans, administrative assistance to the DDA board, its committees, and the City of Harbor Springs staff. That in addition, the DDA administrator will be responsible for working with the board and City of Harbor Springs to implement DDA projects. And so that's an ongoing project and for all of us. The next line item was a study of the existing parking system and policies and a plan for future parking needs in the downtown area. And that was put on hold and not chosen, the DDA chose not to pursue that at the moment. The next item was develop a plan for downtown promotional events and marketing and work with relevant entities to implement. And that is an ongoing project for us. We have now are heading into our fourth annual Ice Fest. Let me have that wrong. And then other marketing campaigns in the downtown, such as Up to Snow Good and helping the businesses and sharing those things on social media and other resources that we have. The next item was implement a business recruitment and retention program, and that's something that the DDA is still working to develop. The next item is develop and implement a downtown enhancement grant program. This grant program will provide assistance to businesses and property owners within the DDA boundary that wish to make improvements or enhancements. We did receive a grant in 2020 from the Pulaski Harbor Springs Area Community Foundation that we were able to help with some COVID relief. And we are continuing to investigate other grants that we might be able to offer to businesses, especially right now as we're looking at the Merchants Walkway for back alley improvements. And then the final item that was on the original plan was to provide additional snow removal and management for downtown by contracting services. Again, that's another item that is on hold at this point. You can see these are some of the projects that we did. The DDA managed the Main Street Gardens this summer, implementing flowers and trying to improve upon the way that Main Street looked, working with the Harbor Springs National Honor Society. Our Ice Fest. And then other ongoing events, Marina Park and wayfinding. Those were all things that we kind of highlighted this year that we've been working on. Also developed a downtown website, have used different social media and television promotion of the businesses and the events that we've had downtown. What we're looking at in Harbor Springs for 2022 is the annual Ice Fest that will be held this February 11th and 12th of 2022. We're going to be offering a lot of live demonstrations. Again, we were able to last year, even during COVID, have over 40 sculptures throughout the town and bringing people on a weekend into the downtown. We're currently working on the downtown lighting project and replacing all of the downtown light post globes. That's one thing that we've gotten a lot of feedback about, those not necessarily matching and looking that great. So we are converting all the lights from their original ballast to energy saving LED fixtures, and the total cost on that is $20,328. And then the other project that we're looking at as we go into 2022 is the Merchants Walkway. And we've done a lot of fact finding and needs assessing. We've received estimates and are still in the process of receiving more estimates and quotes as far as what can be done there, either to remove the fountain, to repair it, or just create a more of a plaza type of area back there, and then look at also offering some sort of grant to businesses to help them make the decision to clean up their area. And so the estimated cost on that is $50,000. That is where we are at. That is a summary of what's happened for 2021 and where we're going with 2022. So if anybody has any questions regarding the DDA, happy to answer them.
I just one comment to add in. We are not, as you noticed, as rich as some of our neighboring communities with funds, but with the funds that we do have, our intent is to make the downtown as nice as it can be with what we have.
Where are things at with the county?
We submitted a letter to the Attorney General, and the Attorney General has said that they would not make a formal opinion. So at this point, what we're thinking is probably that we would continue to renew. We need to renew our TIF by September of 2022, and at that point, approach the county again, see if they would be, if they will participate in the capture at this point. But that's kind of where we stand with it. The Attorney General is not going to force the issue.
How delinquent are they?
Well, they stopped paying in 2019.
Like 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, and in those first couple of years, the amount was pretty nominal, but it's growing each year as you can see from what's projected would have been projected for 2021.
Thank you.
Basically, the Attorney General said that their job is not to deal with government to government, and that the way the legislation has been crafted, cities have the right, or governmental entities have the right to legally pursue things on their own. And that's not their job. They're more global, and the citizens of the state and the governments have our own resources to go after issues. So it wasn't about the issue, it was about their position of intervening between government and government.
And thanks for your 9 years of service, Kathy. She is retiring.
I'm done, by the way.
Okay, so last council meeting, we discussed the idea of transitioning the Marina Park Committee, or eliminating the Marina Parks Committee and making a general parks board from that. And I think council was generally on board with that. So I had Rachel and I talked with Jim Raymer about putting an ordinance together, because that would be the process to forming a board as a first step. And here's, as you probably read in your packet, the ordinance is there, but just the key highlights of what we envision the board to be would be an advisory board advising the city on planning, programming, managing parks and recreation land and assets. So the key highlights of the ordinance says there'll be 5 members. We talked about one of those members being a council member. we'd also open it up to a student member, and right now the student member, Josie, and the Marina Park Committee, we envision her just serving on the Parks Board until we advertise for that next year. It will be staggered, the membership would be staggered to begin with. The mayor would appoint the boards, was subject to confirmation by majority vote of council. As you know, our different boards and commissions have different ways of appointing. Some, the mayor appoints and council confirms, others, any council member can make a recommendation. So the board will make reports and recommendations to council on a regular basis. And it will establish bylaws. So once the board has their first meeting, at that meeting, they will establish some bylaws and then council would approve those bylaws. And they're, just like with most of our other boards, there would be a chair and a vice chair, and our staff for that board, which would be Rachel Roon, the Parks Director, would serve as a secretary. So she handled the posting of the agenda, taking the minutes, and et cetera. And this is something that Rachel really thinks is a good idea, especially now that we're trying to get a master parks plan together. It's a perfect time to get the public opinion and the public's input on that process. And the Parks Board is very beneficial because once you get that marked, the master plan, Parks Master Plan, it opens us up to more grants and funding opportunities. So I think what we asked for now is a review, a discussion about the ordinance or any of the makeup of it, any changes or suggestions. And if you do, then we'll just get those to Jim, and Jim will publish those in the Harbor Light as an ordinance. And move on to forming the board. And also we're recruiting right now for board members. So I imagine at the December 20th meeting, when we appoint all the other board members for Harbor Commission, Planning Commission, et cetera, that we'd appoint Parks Board members as well.
I think it looks great. One question I have is, I can see where there would possibly be some overlap between the Harbor Commission and the Parks Board. Because when you look at the zoning map, the waterfront park and the parks overlap. So I think, don't they down?
So, but the Harbor Commission is specifically focused on the water end of things. So they don't really talk about the management of the actual, there is some overlap, I guess, when you're talking about kayak storage and maybe.
I just think it needs to be, we need to make sure that it's understood which boards are recommending what. Because there is some overlap from the waterfront zoning area and the parks. So I could just see that there's some overlap there. Just an observation. But I think the ordinance is great. I think the 5-member city residents, one from council, I think it's a good balance of makeup for a community.
Some other communities have a general parks director, and then the harbor master kind of falls under Parks and Recreation. We're not structured that way. I don't suggest we be structured that way, but different communities do different things to kind of put it all under the umbrella of parks, but kind of way to fix that problem, yes.
There's just some overlap on the waterfront parks.
It will clearly be working closely together.
They have
in
to
those
be
areas.
working
Yeah.
closely together.
No, I like the idea that it's a formal board, and it's an important topic, as we've seen both from experience and from surveys, so I think it's great.
Will this, like work directly with Rachel?
Yeah. She would staff the board, but they're serving to advise the city, the council. So, for example, if, one of the things we want to do is create a parks master plan. So obviously Rachel would be staffing that, and then that parks master plan would come to council for approval, final approval, but the parks board would be focusing on getting those details together. So everything that comes out of the parks board discussions, any kind of changes to the parks or anything like that would go to council for approval. It's advisory, just like the Harbor Commission is, in that sense.
This is similar to what happened with the tree board, right?
Yeah.
Went from an informal group to.
Yeah.
So from us, you need,
Approval, adoption of the ordinance to create the parks board.
I would make a motion to approve the ordinance as presented.
I'll second.
We'll do a roll call. Matt Boogera,
Yes.
Al Dyke,
Yes.
John Leo,
Yes.
John Cox,
Yes.
Nancy Rondell.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Now get to work.
We hope to have that first meeting probably sometime in January. Yeah, okay. That depends on how many people we get to apply, but I think we already have 2 or 3 people interested, so. Yeah, a lot of people on. All right, 3C. The MPPA, Franklin Energy Clean Energy Program. So I think, I don't know if it was back in September, or October, we talked about how we have a clean energy program that was mandated by the state. That mandate was expiring at the end of the year, and council decided to, let's pursue continuing contracting with another company to provide those similar services, even though they're no longer legally mandated. We currently use Clear Result. That contract expired in end of this year. Not a lot of our staff members have great things to say about, the services or the public. A lot of times the public don't even know that the programs that they offer. So, and that's a lot of feedback other MPPA members have had as well. So we decided to have the MPPA which are our energy power providers, have them do a search for a clean energy provider. And they took out bids. They put out an RFP and got several bids back, and then they made a recommendation to all the members, because obviously it's more efficient and less expensive to go in this as a group as it would be to do it individually. And they came out with Franklin Energy as being the top provider. They had 5 bids. 2 of them they said weren't really qualified. So they looked at Clear Result, which we use. Efficiency United is another name for Clear Result. And they used Franklin Energy, and there was another one there. And Franklin Energy, the key highlights for Franklin Energy was that 70% of the money goes toward the customer incentives, which is higher than the other bids. So the other contractors had higher overhead and higher staff costs. So really what we want to see is more money going to incentives and programs, and that's what Franklin Energy is doing. They also offer EV charger incentives and street light fixtures. They have the most new and innovative programs compared to other ones, and MPPA members who have used Franklin Energy have only had good things to say about them. So one of our worries was, from a staff perspective, is being that these companies are located, or these contractors are located quite a bit of distance from us, that one-on-one, face-to-face kind of interaction with our customers. Will they be in the town, not necessarily going door to door, but doing events and making sure their programs are known. And that's something that I think it's kind of hard to do with such a limited number of contractors out there that offer this service. But Franklin Energy said they'll make a commitment to do better than they have been doing. So for their current customers, which are already happy with them. So I think if council still wants to go forward with dedicating the same amount of money, which was, I think the charge to a resident was about $1 a month, or a 1% monthly fee, and almost $3 a month for commercial. So I think if council still wants to go to that amount, it's about $75,000 annually. It's no different than what we've been doing in the previous years, except that it's just not legally mandated this year. That comes from our electric fund. If not, then our options are to do nothing. And the risk with doing nothing, as I mentioned last time, was that the whole premise of us getting the state to get rid of this mandate was that we could do it better on our own. So, in the long run, that could come back to bite us. Other options is try to look for someone on our own instead of Franklin Energy, or handle it in-house, but you can't handle it in-house without hiring more staff in the electric department. So I don't recommend doing that.
I think it's a worthwhile endeavor.
And it would be only a 1-year contract. So if it
They're
doesn't,
just it's 1 year, so if it doesn't work,
yeah.
it's not a long-term commitment, and I agree, it's worthwhile.
A little bit helps.
Looks good to me.
Okay. So there's a motion for that.
Need a motion?
You have to authorize me to sign.
I'll make a motion that we authorize Victor.
Second.
John Leo,
Yes.
Nancy Rondell,
Yes.
Al Dika,
Yes.
Matt Bagheera,
Yes.
John Cox, so motion carried.
Excellent.
Great, thank you. So next on board, we have our electric system study presentation. And our electric system engineers is GRP Engineering. And right today we have Michael McGeehan, who has been our long-term engineer and expert on Harbor Springs electric system, here to present on the study. As you know, it's a long study. You probably saw it's a good 80, 90 pages. But really I know what council really focused on is that capital improvements timeline of the $12 million of projects or so that we have to do in the next 6 years. And Michael's going to talk a little bit about this study results and then about those projects.
Victor, thank you very much. Yeah, I don't want to jump right to the end. Certainly, we'll spend just a couple of brief minutes doing an overview of the study. My name is Michael McGinn. I am the president of GRP Engineering. GRP does stand for Grand Rapids and Petoskey. Been very fortunate to call Northern Michigan my home for 28 years and planning to stay right here. Completed the system study and 5-year plan. Yes, a very large document, but certainly required for this essential service to the city of Harbor Springs. The scope of this plan was to assess the capacity that is in the system, do an overall physical assessment of the system, effectively looking at every end of the electrical system, come back, provide this list of recommendations and into this capital improvement plan that we are providing to you here. This study was a capacity study. So it's looking at, can the electrical system supply the needs today and 5 and 10 years down the road? And because this is a capacity study, this is looked at under peak electrical conditions. The peak conditions that you have here are during those summer months when the temperatures are high, load is up due to the number of individuals and just running air conditioners, et cetera. You are definitely a summer peaking utility. The system here comprised of one electric substation, Clayton Road Substation, which is way on the eastern side of the electrical system. There are 3 circuits that provide the distribution and serve all the load all the way across the community and all the way out into the township. 75 miles of line, 60% overhead, 40% underground. So that's always a number everybody says, how are we doing as far as putting our system underground, as many communities like to aesthetically. 40% of the system is underground. Although I'll comment more on that, and you probably saw as you read that there are some deficiencies in that. With the study, we did establish an operating philosophy. So it's not just the electric staff or somebody saying how much should we allow our substation equipment, our electrical distribution equipment to operate. We established that philosophy. And one thing I want to comment on is it's a goal for the city of Harbor Springs with the philosophy that is presented in the study. It's not a hard, fast documentation. Now, I will follow that up with, we are currently providing electrical engineering services to 20 municipalities in the state of Michigan that own their own electrical system. And the goals that were put in here are very close. They align very, very closely with those other communities that we're working with. So it's not something special here for the city of Harbor Springs. In that goal, substation equipment in the one substation is to not have substation equipment operate more than 50% of the rated capacity under a normal condition, and 80% under first contingency. First contingency means the loss or removal of one piece of equipment. So if we have 2 substation transformers there, which you do, if we take one of them out of service, we want to ensure that the other transformer can provide and serve the rest of the load under those peak times. Distribution conductors, the distribution circuits coming out, that they would be limited to operate at 50% of their capacity under a normal condition and 90% under a first contingency, or the loss of one circuit. And the reason, again, that we do that is under any condition, if we take a substation transformer out of service for maintenance or an unplanned outage, something happens to it, failure, whatever, we have maybe a wildlife incident or whatever, and we need to take that out. You need to be able to serve all of your customer load under that first contingency. Same with the distribution circuits. If we have a distribution circuit that's lost due to a weather event, a car pole accident, you want to be able to serve all that customer load without taking lengthy outages. So that's the reasoning for that operating philosophy, to be looking at a 40% rating for substation equipment and 50% rating for your distribution circuits. In the analysis that we looked at, your substation equipment loading, the 2 transformers at Clayton Road Substation on a peak day And this, the peak that we did with the study was July of 2020. We started the study early in 2021, so we were using data from 20. Substation transformer number one operating at 88% of its rated capacity, and substation transformer number two at 86%. So the goal is 40. Both of them are operating more than double of what the rating is. Under first contingency loading, so if we take one of those two substation transformers out of service, I'll take 88 and 86, add them together, we're at 174%. What that means is if we lose one substation transformer, we're going to have lengthy outages to the customers. Other critical piece of equipment there's voltage regulators that do regulate the voltage coming out on the distribution system. They are operating 73% and 46% respectively under peak conditions. So again, well over that 40% rating. And it is worth noting the summer peaks here are more than double season. What is a shoulder season? Spring and fall. So you do have a very, very large increase in load during those summer months. Loading on the distribution circuits, similar. All three of the circuits coming out of Clayton Road substation are operating well over 50% of the rating. Again, the goal is 50. All three of them are operating well over that. We did an assessment to see what happens if we take one of those circuits out and move all the load over to another. So again, if we have a car pull accident, something happens that we lose a circuit, and we tie that load and move it over to one of the others, all of the distribution circuits would be operating well over 90%. And most of the backup circuits would be over 100. So again, under a first contingency condition with the distribution circuits, we can't serve all of the load under peak times if we take one of them out of service. We also assess the voltage across the system based on MPSC and ANSI standards. The voltage on the system, we do have two circuits that do have voltage issues. Circuit 2, which is really the northern area, and Circuit 3, which serves all of downtown and all the way out to the far western end of Shore Drive. All of those circuits have voltage issues. They don't meet the standards under the peak conditions. And the reason for that is the amount of load and the location of the substation being 5 miles east of the center of the load, which is right here in the downtown area. So our concerns with that are generally very obvious in that if we follow this goal that's been established and we try to maintain service to all the customers and we lose a major piece of equipment or a major distribution circuit, we're not going to be able to do it. Right now, substation transformers, you do have one spare that is sitting out in the substation yard, which is good, although it's been sitting there untested and not used for many, many years. So that would be a first step that we would recommend, and we do recommend that in the study, is to make sure that that transformer could be put into service. Purchase of a new substation transformer. Right now, manufacturers are telling us all the way up to 190 weeks to get new substation transformers. This is supply chain driven issues. And it's something that planning has to occur, because let's say that spare transformer is not usable. If we lose a substation transformer, unfortunately, you don't have another spare, and the municipalities in the state don't maintain spare transformers. We can't go down the road and just pick one up and bring it here. So this is something that this is turning into long-range planning, but very quick decisions have to be made to ensure that the system can serve the load. We did an assessment, again, overview of all the equipment in the substations and looked at the distribution system. Really, our biggest concerns are just the aging of the equipment. Clayton Road sub was built in 1991. That was 30 years ago. And again, if it's going to take us several years to get equipment to start to replace, all of a sudden we're at 35 years, and that equipment is going also beyond its useful life. So we have a number of recommendations that are presenting. That's kind of my quick overview of the study without going through the 90 pages of it. But our recommendations, put together ended up being a 6-year capital plan. And we looked at what are the most critical items. What are the most critical things that we need to look at? And certainly that is the substation transformers, and then the distribution circuits as well, to ensure that we can serve the load under peak conditions and first contingency conditions. We came up with 18 projects for the first 6 years, and then other projects beyond it. This is by no means the first 18 are not the full list. Again, looking out 10 years, we have other projects that are certainly less critical, but are needed on the system. When we look at the list that's in front of us here, broken up by a year and ranking all 18 projects, and also looking at what is the priority. Are these high priority projects, medium, or low? So we can have an understanding of how critical this is. From the substation side, are again recommending that the spare transformer out of Clayton Road sub be tested and have a written plan in place with all the material in place to put that into service if needed. As opposed to, yep, it's there and it'll work. Have we checked the air in our spare tire on the car lately? Let's make sure that we have. That's the analogy I'm using. Let's make sure that we can put that in service in a moment's notice. Do we have the crane company in there, et cetera, things like that. Other critical items is protecting all of the points in the substation where wildlife can get into to protect wildlife, and so that we reduce outages that would take out a large number of customers at one time. But then directly moving into on the substation side, the very last item on that page that's in front of you is a recommendation to construct a new substation. So let's work on what we have right now. Let's ensure everything that we have is protected, but let's get that plan in place for a new substation. And you ask why, and I'm sure there'll be several questions on that as well. The location of Clayton Road substation, as I mentioned a minute ago, is 5 miles east of downtown. The best location for an electrical substation, even an electrical service at a building, is at the center point of the load. You want that substation to be very, very close to the load so that you don't have a lot of losses in the system as current is flowing thousands of feet or miles and miles down the line. With Clayton Road substation being 9 miles from the end of the distribution circuit number 3, there are significant losses that occur. Those losses also create voltage drop. So we're paying to heat up conductors. Again, that's just throwing money out the door. It's like leaving the window open in the winter. And we're also having issues with the voltage not meeting the standards that we need to. The original substation, of course, was located right here with the diesel plant many, many years ago. And the old transmission line served into this area. This is where the center of the load is. The downtown area serving out. So this is the appropriate location to construct a new substation, somewhere within 1,000 or 1,500 feet or so of the center of the load. That will allow you then to connect back into all of the main distribution circuits, sectionalize them off, and reduce the length of each one of those circuits, which certainly will reduce the losses in the system. The critical project that has to happen with construction of a new substation is rebuilding the old 46 kV line that did serve into town here. That will have to be rebuilt, re-insulated to serve a new line. So those are joint projects that would have to occur concurrently. You can break that up a little bit, build the transmission line as one is waiting for a new substation transformer, which, as I mentioned, are many, many, many months out at this time. Other capital projects that we are recommending is on the distribution system. M119 phase 3 and phase 4 rebuild, which is out on, again, the very west end of the system where we know We are working to replace aged equipment and to ensure that we do keep that voltage up to where it's required to meet ANSI standards. That's an ongoing project. We're into phase 3 proposed for next year and phase 4 for 2023. Also on the distribution system, there's a number of projects later in the plan and showing even again after the 6 into the 10-year timeframe is on the distribution system. What we have found, as I mentioned, 40% of the distribution system is underground. A lot of it was put underground in the 1970s and 80s using cable that had exposed neutral wires on the outside. We call it unjacketed cable. What the utilities have found throughout the country is putting that unjacketed exposed neutral cable in the ground, not in conduit, just burying it. And with the insulation that was used, that it has failed. And we have had multiple failures here with it and are chasing them. And it's not something that is just here in Harbor Springs, it's throughout the utility system. So the plan to continue to go after replacing those cables before it gets to the point where you have to. So that's something that once you get through some of these larger capital projects is to continue out on that distribution system and ensuring we're replacing proactively those aged cables. There are a few other projects that are in that list. I won't go through all of them right now, certainly open for questions, answering them as you may have on the AMI system, implementation of GIS. But that is really the brief summary of the study, the goals, and the recommendations that we have brought to you today.
Council, any questions?
So, when was the last study done?
15 years ago, I had the pleasure of presenting a study 15 years ago.
Did that study have similar recommendations?
Yes, sir, it did.
So no action was taken on those?
There were projects that were included in that study that certainly were completed.
But some of these, the majority of these are very significant long-term projects that I don't remember coming before council. So that's something that.
You weren't around then.
Yeah, well, I've been here for 9
The substation was on the 2006 plan.
Yes.
Which is the most significant long-term. The circumstances for that being an important issue haven't changed. In fact, they've gotten worse.
You're correct.
And Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, but the substation cost back then was probably like, what, $2 million?
I would have to look it up, but certainly it was considerably cheaper, and a year ago it was cheaper.
Yeah.
Most
And you could go down the street, get
Why did the substation get moved to Clayton? Why did it get moved from? Okay.
I don't, personally, I do not have an answer to that. I don't know if staff know.
They assumed the load was gonna be out in that area.
commercial.
Commercial.
Okay.
West Traverse or
That was
Little
all
Traverse
gonna grow
Township's
up.
considered the commercial.
Okay, rather than what just
So,
happened
right,
this way.
residential.
Okay, okay.
They didn't think residential was gonna
Was
go
gonna pull.
as crazy as it is.
Okay.
And it was also for an aesthetic. Because when that substation was here, the first thing you saw when you came over the hill on 119 was the substation and that spider web of lines that left it. And I was on the council back then and we didn't want it here. We wanted to get that ugly thing out of here. So we had property available at the sewer station. So we took advantage of that and built the new substation out there and got rid of the mess that was here. And I would hesitate, I stand against putting a substation here. I could see it going up by the DPW yard or something like that. It's not the 1,000 feet, but it sure is a lot closer than what we have today. But to put it back here, that'd be a terrible mistake for the city.
So
They do a lot with them nowadays, though. They make them, they look a lot different. and
Is there room up on top of the hill?
There's spots, yeah.
Tear down the ambulance barn. It's just a storage shed anyway.
that's quite a ways away from where our major line is, to try to build it to there, you're talking.
Oh,
'Cause you have to get that 46 line all the way over there.
all
Right,
over there.
yeah,
Gotcha.
really, yeah,
Yep.
the main reasons is the existing 46 kV line, which
Right,
ends up
right.
at Lake and Hoyt.
Yep.
That line will have to be extended to wherever the substation is constructed. And then the distribution circuits will have to be built back out. And again, around that center point of that area is ideal, because this is where the main circuits all come right through that area, Lake and Hoyt, right here on Main, and then down on Pennsylvania. And so, because that's where they originally, came from. Electric substations can be screened very well. We had the pleasure of doing, if you go to downtown Traverse City, there's an electric substation in downtown Traverse City. And probably nobody is aware of that.
Where in downtown?
Hall Street. It's a Hall and Grandview Parkway. If you remember, there used to be a power plant and a substation on the bayfront down there. We now have a substation in Traverse City. We did that a number of years ago. Did that about 18 years ago. There's a substation there and you can't see it because it's in a building.
Michael, would we be boring the lines, under M119, or be a line above?
Depending on the location, being on the north side or south side of 119, yes, all lines, including the 46 and the estimate that we've done, all the lines would enter and exit underground. So that one would not see the spider web of overhead lines that you mentioned. And then aesthetically, you can screen the substation with walls, building, evergreens. There are ways to screen it and to find the proper location that it doesn't become the eyesore that it can when you enter your community and drive in and say, I know beauty's in the eye, but an electric substation, you're correct, does not belong behind the Welcome to the City of Harbor Springs sign. So it would be to find the proper location that serves electrically and does not become an eyesore.
So we're not here to decide the location today.
It's good. I agree with everything else in the plan, except that. Let's move forward with the plan. But find a better place than this for the substation.
How about the deer park?
It's still down here. It's still something you'd see.
Just saying.
Well, part of the plan would have to be to look at trade-offs. I mean, if the ideal center is right outside that window, that might be the ideal center from an electrical standpoint and certainly from an aesthetic. So the farther you move away, what are the trade-offs? That has to be part of the study.
The ideal location would be the baseball fields. My 17-year-old son, Steven, is here joining me this evening. He's a baseball fanatic. Boy, that would be bad. That's actually the ideal location, is actually more right up Lake and Hoyt, right there, somewhere within 1,000 feet. So,
Well, it's very likely that whatever locale we choose someone. will get.
yes.
But the need,
Well, we don't have to decide that tonight.
no, but to me, the need to move forward is clear.
Yeah.
I mean,
We're gonna be in trouble if we don't.
Sounds like we have, or tell people they can have air conditioning.
there you go.
So I think, Dan, you and Lucas did look at potential spots, and I know we looked at,
Yeah.
so if you want to talk about that a little.
Yeah,
bit.
there was one spot, like you're saying, up by where you live, but it's more in the wooded area off East Lake. In that spot where you wouldn't even see it in the woods. It would literally be surrounded, the trees, you wouldn't see it. And we could bore that line to it, so you wouldn't see that either.
The triangle,
So it would be hidden.
up in the triangle.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah.
Up by Bay Bluff, set like the
Yeah,
Bay Bluff.
across the
Soccer fields, yeah.
And that would be a good spot for it.
It's close.
That would make sense.
Or is it just?
No, they make noise, but the transformers. but-
A transformer under its highest load, which means they have fans on them to cool, which operates just under the absolute peak conditions, about 70 decibels at 6 feet, which is the sound of a vacuum cleaner. So you move away and you do a little bit of screening, you don't hear your neighbor's vacuum cleaner, and so you would not hear that.
What do you need?
This is just an overview, just so you, so the reason I put all this on the agenda before we go to the proposed budget is because all these items relate to the budget. So I wanted you guys to have understanding of some of our needs that I wouldn't be able to explain, but that our engineer could explain on why we need some of these projects. But this is just for your information and to discuss and or just absorb it, to know that this, especially the substation conversation will come back, the discussion of location and how we're gonna get that to work. But I wanted to be on your mind for when we talk about the budget.
Which makes a lot of sense, but they've also highlighted a couple of items that need to be acted on immediately. So those should be on someone's docket.
They are in our CIP. Yeah.
Victor,
Sounds like an order, a purchase order needs to be placed with a, how many weeks was it?
190.
Up to 190.
190 week lead time.
on this board.
Is this a situation where it's not an open bid thing? This is just.
I just don't know if we're doing public comment. I just want
Everybody else was talking about.
to, no, everyone is talking.
Thank you. Very, very scary and very educational.
Well put together. I even understood it, which is impressive.
Just one last question. When you said there were voltage issues, is that voltage level fluctuations?
Yes, ANSI and MPSC established a range for where the voltage should be. And the model, and we've done work, we've added voltage regulators in. Again, the rebuild, the phase rebuild on 119 that's occurring is helping those issues. But our computer model shows that we're under the most peak conditions are not meeting those requirements.
Which is voltage level within a given margin.
That is correct.
Thank you.
We do have a couple comments from the public, if you want to get to those.
Public comment? Somebody?
I just had a question.
Okay.
Is this not the same type of situation where a project is put out and it's bid, or just one person, it's just automatic awarding?
Which project?
This current project we're discussing right now.
The substation?
Yes,
That would be, we would go through the whole bid process for that, yeah.
it does go through
Yeah,
a bid
yeah.
process.
What's submitted into the MPPA. So we did 5-year load growth and we did 10-year load growth. Certainly EV, electrification is going to be a major factor. And how much that is going to be is unknown. That will only compound the problem.
So there's no factor in there for.
There's still a factor for growth. And we certainly leave, part of the reason that the goals are to not run equipment fully up to 100% is to ensure that load growth, a large load addition into the community, EV can be covered.
If we're getting more energy efficient with the new system, moving it closer, everything like that, are there federal grants or any type of federal programs, clean energy type of things that we could apply for?
We have found it difficult, and MPPA has really tried to assist with this as well. But to find grants for municipal electric systems is very challenging. Very challenging.
For the record?
Thomas Miguelski.
I think we had a comment. Jeff James says there has to be a better place for that ugly thing. Agree with that.
Well, I think a lot of people look back at what it used to look like. They don't look like that anymore. They're not near as bad as that eyesore of the one that was, so many years ago.
If you Google the one in Traverse City, which I did just a bit ago, you won't see it.
They've come a long way.
Yeah, especially if you have underground coming and going from us. I don't know. All right, enough discussion on this, guys, ladies.
I'm satisfied.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's helpful.
Well done.
Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Stephen. All right, we have, so the next topic of discussion is electric rates, and electric rate study is something that we put in motion before we had the results of this electric system study. This is something that Nick has been going on for what, 2 years now? 3 years, this is the rate study, and the rates haven't been increased in probably a good 15 years, maybe more. So we did an electric rate study to see if they need to be raised and or changed. And we have Mark Beauchamp, who just presented to council last, and I think late October or November about.
November.
So Mark Beauchamp is online here on Zoom to kind of go over the rate design that he put in place. So Mark, can you hear us?
Yeah, yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so whenever you're ready, I have the PowerPoint up. You can go.
Okay, can I share my screen or, okay, that'll work too.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate the opportunity to go through the electric study again. I know we spoke, I think it was November 8th when I made the presentation on the financial projection, the cost of service results. Since that time, of course, there were some slight modifications to the capital plan. I know Mike had just gone through the capital projections, and Harbor Springs in very good financial condition or position to fund those capital improvements with just modest adjustments in rates. And one of the things that came out of the meeting last time was that we had a projection, which I'll go through, that showed a 2.5% rate adjustment for 3 years, followed by projected 4.9% adjustments. And the city council's recommendation was to flatten out those rate adjustments. At the same time, the capital improvement program got moved up. So like the substation improvement addition got moved to 2023. And so when we looked at that, actually we were able to accommodate both the moving up of the substation improvement and also flattening out the rate adjustments over the 5-year period. So what you're going to see when I go through this is just some modest rate adjustments of about 3.3%, 3.3% each year to fund these capital improvement programs. If you want to go to the next slide. Actually, I'm going to go through the revised financial projections, as well as review with you the cost of service results. And the main purpose of this meeting is to go through the rate designs. And the rate designs was to achieve the adjustments in rates, as well as move the customer classes closer to the cost of service requirements. And one of the things we discussed in the last meeting was to take the customer charge and to adjust that for the residential by about $2 each year for the 3-year rate design period. So it's a 3-year rate design track that we're presenting tonight. So you can go forward, Victor. All right. This is the capital improvement program. On the left-hand side is the capital improvement program that I originally presented on November 8th. On the right-hand side is the revised capital improvement program based on primarily moving up the substation from 2026, 2027 time period to the 2023, 2024 time period. So these capital improvement programs matches up in total to what Mike had just presented to you. So you can go forward to the next slide. So when we make a projection, of course, we base it on certain assumptions, and some of the assumptions are related to inflation and growth and purchase power cost changes. One of the things to fund the capital improvement program in 2024, we're recommending a bond issuance of about $5.5 million to finance the construction of the new substation. And in 2027, we're looking at possibly an additional debt issuance of about $1 million. And then in the projection, we assume that the interest rate that would pay on the debt would be 5% and that the repayment period would be 20 years. So you can go ahead. Is there any questions before I go forward further into the presentation?
I don't see any, Mark.
Okay. This is the financial projection I originally presented in November. And with the 2.5% adjustments now, followed by two 4.9% increases. And one of the concerns of the city council was to try to flatten those adjustments out, to try to prevent, if at all possible, that 4.9% adjustment that was occurring in 2025 and 2026. So if you go to the next slide, what we did is we used 3.3% rate adjustments. And when we look at these financial projections, we look at three key financial targets. One of them, and one of the most critical ones, is the cash reserves. And if you look on the right-hand side, the very right-hand column, you see recommended minimum cash. So the recommended minimum cash varies each year, but between about 1.3 million and 1.7 million. Your projected cash reserves based on the financial plan is about $3 million each year. Of course, it declines, and in 2026 is at 1.9 million, but we're still above our recommended minimum cash reserves with this rate plan. The second target, which is debt coverage ratio, which is on the left-hand side, the third column in, you see the debt coverage ratio in 2024 is 1.46. We target a minimum coverage ratio of 1.4, and that's to ensure that we can get the proper bond ratings, to get the lowest interest rate possible, that we don't violate any bond covenants. And so we're 1.46 in 2024. And each year after that, we increased to 2.17 in 2026. The third target we look at, which is in the center of this table, is called the adjusted operating income and the target operating income. Now, this is a theoretical target, and we set a rate track. How we look at it is we need to set rate adjustments so that you have cash above the minimum cash reserve requirements, and that you maintain your legal requirements as far as debt coverage ratio. Those are our minimum requirements. Our upper boundary is our target operating income. So we establish a range of minimum and a maximum. And so when we set a rate track, we want to stay between those targets. So below the target operating income, but above the minimum cash reserves and the debt coverage ratios. And with these 3.3% rate adjustments, we stay right in between those two thresholds of targets. And that, of course, is a relatively modest adjustment for your customers. So before I move on, because this is a revision from the November 8th presentation, is there any questions about the rate track or the targets that we've established?
No.
No, Mark. You can go ahead.
Good. All right, you go forward. All right, now this is the cost of service results that we reviewed last time. And when we looked at these cost of service results, most of your major rate classes were fairly close to cost of service. I mean, there's some variations. Your residential rates inside the city showed the need for a 13.5% increase, which the average increase that the study identified was 4.6. So it's about 10% approximately above the average. What that tells us is that when we design rates, the residential customers inside the city should get slightly higher rates than the average. And what you'll see in our rate design, that the inside city residentials, the rate track that we put together, they're getting a little bit higher than the 3.3% adjustments. So when you look at the bottom part, like the electric demand inside and outside, they're pretty much right at the average on the bottom part. 6% increase for the electric demand inside, 4% outside. Those are on the bottom. In the center part, you have the electric commercial outside the city, which is a minus 9.1%. But we use this in the rate design process to move the classes closer to the cost of service requirement. So you can go forward to the next slide. Now, one of the things that we discussed in the last meeting was the customer charge. You currently have a very low customer charge, at $4 for your residential customers. This is a fixed monthly charge, and it's designed to recover certain costs that do not vary based on consumption. So when a customer has a meter installed on their home or their electric or their facilities, the electric utility had the cost to install the meter. They have the responsibility to repair the meter, to read the meter every month, to send the customer a bill, and the service drop. Those are fixed costs that do not vary based on consumption. So that fixed monthly customer charge is designed to recover those fixed costs. And for your residential customers, that number should be $12.49 a month. So what that tells us is any increases primarily should be placed into that customer charge. Now, in discussions with the city council, the criteria that you provided to us was to increase that fixed monthly customer charge by $2 each year. So go from $4 to $6 to $8, $10, and that, so $2 each year to get closer to that $12.49. So, and that, go to the next slide. One of the things that we also wanted to put together was a survey of rates of other utilities in the area. And what you see is that your rates are, for the most part, the lowest of any utility in your area. On the left-hand side, you see Harbor Springs. This is a annual cost for an average residential customer using 615 kilowatt hours a month. Their annual electric costs are $779. Most of the other municipals are right in the same range. The only one that's slightly less is Petoskey, and they're at $766. But Great Lakes Energy is almost 53% higher. And Detroit Edison is 71% higher, and Consumers Energy is 73% higher. So you can see that your electric rates are some of the lowest in the state of Michigan. So, and these rate tracks, these modest rate adjustments, you'll still be very competitive with all the utilities in your area. So, is there any questions before I get into the rate design?
No more.
All right, you go ahead. Now, the rate design that we propose, about 3.3% adjustment each year. Now, remember the residential showed the need for a higher than average adjustment. So the adjustment that we're looking at for the residentials with this rate track is 4.1% each year for the residential customers inside the city. Outside the city, it's about 4 to 4.3% each year. And so each of these rate classes, we design these rates to move them closer to the cost of service results. Now, the following slides, I'll get into the detail. So if you want to go to the next slide. This is the inside city residential rate. So if you look on the left-hand side, your current customer charge is $4 a month. As I mentioned earlier, we moved that up $2 each year to $6 and $8 and $10. And then we adjusted the energy rates. The non-summer energy rates, we kept the same. And we slightly adjusted upward the summer energy rates. And to achieve the 4.1% adjustment. Now, if you look on the right-hand side, the average customer in Harbor Spring uses about 630 kilowatt hours a month. So if you look at like the 700 kilowatt hour on the chart. So what they'll see as far as an average monthly increase in their bill is $2.72 in the first year, $2.85 in year 2, and $2.97 in year 3. So a relatively modest rate adjustment. So is there any questions about this? This is one of your largest classes, rate classes. Okay, you can go ahead. This is the outside city. And we did a similar adjustment with the outside city ratepayers. And they use, again, about 600, 700 kilowatt hours a month average. They will see about $3 a month increases in their rates. $3.37 the first year, $3.33 the second year, and about $3.38 in year 3. That's on an average consumption about 700 kilowatt hours. In the commercial, the inside and outside city rates will increase about 2% each year. So a very modest adjustment. Of course, the increase is going to vary based on their level of usage. So like a lower customer uses less electricity, we'll see a higher percentage increase. So like at 1,000 kilowatt hours, for example, in the chart on the left, they would see about a 3% increase, which is slightly higher than the 2% average. Once they get above like around about 2,000 kilowatt hours a month, they would see a little bit less than the average increase, somewhere between 1.5% and 2%. And very similar to with the outside city residentials. So again, is there any questions on this? You go forward, Vic. All right, this is the commercial demand. And on average, they get between about 1.6 to 1.9% adjustment inside the city. And that's pretty much consistent on all customers in this class. So what we did is we increased the customer charge, the fixed monthly customer charge. We also increased the demand charge by 50 cents each per kW of billing demand, from $12 to $12.50, then to $13 and $13.50. And we use that to keep the energy rates pretty much the same. So they would see on average, like I said, 1.6, 1.9% adjustment each year. The outside city rates, very similar rate structure. We increased the fixed monthly customer charge to the outside city, increased the demand charge by 50 cents. And on average, they'll see a little bit higher than inside the city. They would see between 2.9 and 3.6% increase per month. Go ahead. And the senior citizen. Now, the senior citizens, percentage-wise, you look at a 9% increase inside the city. Now, the average senior citizen inside the city uses about 230 kilowatt hours a month. So the impact to them is a little over $2, less than $2.50 a month. So percentage-wise, it might be 9%, but the dollar impact is relatively modest. And that's the case for both inside and outside the city customers. The reason this is occurring is because the senior citizens currently don't have a fixed monthly customer charge. And what we're doing with this, we're putting in place a fixed monthly customer charge, going from $0 to $2 to $4 and to $6. One of the things with senior citizens is from an electric cost of service perspective, there's no difference in cost to serve senior citizens. In matter of fact, in some ways, they're probably one of the higher cost class of customers to serve because of their seasonality. And this is a relatively modest dollar impact, although the percentages look bigger, but the dollar impacts are relatively small. And that's the last rate design that I have. So is there any questions about what we've done?
I have one question. The senior citizen category, what percentage of that is that of the total customer base?
It's very small. If you want to go back to, could you go back to the cost of service and give us a general idea? Right, this, that one right there. So the senior citizen inside the city is only $9,000, actually $5,800 out of 4.6 million. So it's very, very small.
I thought it was small. I just wanted to confirm.
And Nick, if you want to clarify that, that senior citizens category is not for senior citizens per se, it's an income level.
Customers in it. It's been set up, I don't know, 20 years ago. And nobody can seem to tell me what the criteria is to become in that group. Or how we ever even got with that group of customers to begin with. So that's something that we're looking at inside the here as this is going on behind the scenes with the rates.
There's a thought that there's a certain income level that maximum income level you could have to be considered that category, so.
Our average age in this town is 63, right? Am I right?
Yes.
That's kind of a funny.
We're all
That's a-
senior citizens.
Yeah.
It may be just misnamed.
I was just gonna say, I think.
Because it's more
yeah.
about the
Income
income level of the senior
Right.
citizens.
Yeah.
Right, so I think it was poverty level back in the day, $14,000 or whatever it might have been. And of a certain age, well, that's just not been revisited in decades.
Does that, are new customers, are people being categorized into senior citizens today?
No,
That's a fixed or declining pool.
it is, correct.
Didn't you have to apply for that?
It's an age.
And then, well, there's also a property tax situation too, where you can get,
Okay,
you know.
yeah. Okay, I wondered, that was one of my questions. I'd never heard of it. Until I read this.
So the plan is not to adopt and approve these rates today, is to come revisit this at December 20th meeting, but this is the time to have any discussion or questions of Mark while he's here before, if there's any changes you want to see in it, or if you think it looks good, the rate design, or if you want to think about it a while and settle on any questions you might have in between now and December 20th. Send those to me, but.
I think you did a good job smoothing out the
Yeah, makes a big difference.
changes.
I like it.
It feels a lot better. to me.
There's those spikes.
Well, it gives the utility more money up front, which we need.
Right.
Something.
All right, Mark, I don't think the council has any other questions.
All right.
Anyone from the public wants any questions?
Anyone from the public?
All right, thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for your time.
And just to clarify, Nick, when was the last rate change made?
2002, maybe. The last rate study, it was done in 96. I think we had a rate increase in 02.
And going forward, we're going to have a process where we're going to do this a little more frequently.
Yeah, we talk about every 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Especially with the renewables coming on board and rates changing.
Well, and that's part of the problem, is that if we had done a incremental rate increase over the last 20 years, we probably would have had more money in to pay for some of these electrical projects. We would not need it. But that's the past. It's, you know, that is what it is.
Well, we can learn from it.
You would hope so.
Okay, the next item, boardwalk
Thank you.
options update. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks.
Yep, bye-bye.
Thank Mike for us. So at the last council meeting, we talked about those different, the need to examine different design options potentially for the barbed walk. Two of those alternate options included, one was a staircase that went straight up with a couple landing spots, and the other was looking to just doing the western half of the boardwalk. And doing the eastern, putting the eastern half off to undetermined time. We recognize though that the money to pay for this would not be able to solely come from the general fund, as is reserves. We'd have to try to find some grants and do some fundraising for that. The least expensive option would be a staircase. I know John Cups looked into it, but we also had Benchmark look into the cost, and anywhere from $150,000 to $250,000, depending on what you want to do with that, how many landings you have, how big those landings are, et cetera. A rebuild of the western half would cost about $560,000, and part of this, $30,000 of that is for lights, because that was something that wasn't considered. We have light posts there, and we are applying for a grant that we would want to have our lighting situation up to standard for the grant purposes. So, but that's a relatively minimal amount, $30,000 of the overall cost change. It's mostly to do with the cost of supplies and supply chain issues there. And so both options would require us to solicit some sort of donations. As I mentioned, we have looked into grants and found no compatible state grants for which we are eligible or that we are likely to get. Basically, they can't tell you not to apply for the grant, but most of them hint to us that we're not going to be eligible for that. But Rachel did find the EDA grant, the Economic Development Administration grant, which is from the Department of the U.S. Department of Commerce. It's called American Rescue Plan Act Travel and Tourism and Outdoor Recreation Fundraising Opportunity. So this is some of those American Rescue Plan monies that are being made available for infrastructure, in this case for tourism and recreation. And for our purposes, we fit in the boardwalk both as pedestrian infrastructure and as well as recreation. So that allows us to look for, different types of funding opportunities. So with this grant, it's possible that we could receive 50% or more of the cost to cover the project if it's awarded to us. It could be 50%, could be 80%, it could be 20%, or it could be none. I mean, but there seems to be, I don't know, Rachel, correct me if I'm wrong, but a decent chance of getting something out of this.
Yeah, when I spoke to the gentleman who is in charge of the grant coordinator, he had said that there weren't a lot of northern Michigan communities who have put in for grants yet. And it's kind of one of those where you put in as long as the money's available, you get an answer pretty quickly. So his advice was to apply as soon as possible. So we were lucky enough to have Benchmark's old plans and kind of be able to revamp.
So one of the things with this grant though, however, is only $500,000 projects or more are eligible. So the staircase option we would not be eligible to submit for that staircase option. So what we're suggesting or what we're doing is applying for the western half of the project. We're not applying for the whole boardwalk project because if we only get a 50% match, then we're on the hook for raising $400,000. We could, it's easier to be on hook for 50% of $560,000 than it is for 50% of what it might be $800,000 or more for the entire replacement. So, and if we get the $560,000 and 50% of that, then we can always still fundraise later for the eastern half if we wanted to. So there's nothing preventing us from doing the entire boardwalk. It's just what we're on the hook for is really why we're applying for the western half versus the eastern half. I think right now at this point, what I'm looking for from council is, I know I've talked to you individually about, looking at this grant award. That I guess really right now is we're about to apply for this grant probably next. I mean, we almost have the application completed. If you guys are okay with going for the western half for a grant award for that, and then based on how that works out, if we get it, start a fundraising campaign, collect fundraisers for that, money for that, look where we're at with our general fund. What some of the proposed cuts we're having this year, we're getting our general fund reserves slightly a bit above our recommended minimum. So we might have some general fund money depending on if we go forward with some of those cuts or not. But if we don't get the grant award, then the question is, do we want to fundraise for much of the money for the for the western half or for a staircase. So we're not, I don't think we're there yet. I think we should wait to see what where we end up with the grant. But Rachel, I don't know if they gave us timeline for how long they reviewed the grants.
No, there's not really a timeline. He said best case scenario is about a month. Worst case scenario is a few months. So it's fairly quick grant wise for an answer back, which is good.
Early midwinter would be what we would know. So my recommended action is to wait and see whether or not we're awarded the grant. Like I said, which might not be until midwinter. And I don't recommend beginning fundraising right now from the city's perspective because we don't know the final design and we don't know the final costs. And I don't think we want to spread some confusion about what that might be. So I know there are as group fundraising right now, and there's a couple of them here, but I don't think from the city's perspective, it's something we should get into yet until we know what design we're going for. So that's what I have. And the plans are in here as you saw, there's a little revamped cost estimates from Benchmark showing when he got a 2019 bid price for the entire project, what it was at, and then the western half only, 2022 estimated cost, and then 10% contingencies takes us to 560.
So push forward.
Yeah.
Makes your suggested plan makes sense. Let's find out if we can get money. And we know what we have to work with.
And plan A, plan B,
Mhm.
and plan C down the road. So. Need a motion?
I don't need a motion. You might want to take public comment.
Public comment?
Just one.
There we go.
Oh, you wouldn't know. You knew what I was gonna say. I happen to have been mayor at the time when we first talked about this. And Benchmark's initial comments was in their survey that this is not an area of their expertise, and yet we continue to pursue Benchmark. They're not the only people, and certainly by their own admission, they're not structural engineers. Their name is Benchmark. It's not a structural engineering company. If we're going to look, we need to look wide and far. And it doesn't have to be done at one time, it can be done in pieces. My only comment.
A couple of things. What is the timetable to complete the project once you get the grant, if you get the grant?
So Rachel, can I talk to that? But
Yeah, so the timetable in the perfect world, if we were awarded the grant this winter or early 2022, we could start construction late spring, possibly. But looking more conservatively and realistically, it'll probably be fall.
So is there a timetable with the grant, I meant, for completion? That if
Oh.
you're awarded the grant, you have to complete it in so much time?
2 years.
2 years.
The question, you're doing the western part because it's smaller, is that the idea?
I think it's because it's the most used.
The western part on Third Street. When you said the western part, do you mean the,
Western half of the boardwalk. So the Spring Street, the stairs, and it goes west. There's another eastern part that goes down to Gardner Street.
yeah, I know, because I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
exercising, that was my exercise during COVID.
So I'll
So I was
get
there
the
all the
map.
time, but isn't there a small section also off of Third and Fourth?
Oh, that's a different staircase.
Okay,
Yeah, that's.
oh,
yeah.
so it is
So
the,
here's.
I would call
yeah.
that the eastern part, but
All right,
okay, I
so
just want to
yeah,
make
so
sure I knew what you
We're talking about this boardwalk between Spring and Gardner, so this
Yeah.
western half would essentially stop right here. So this part right here.
Oh, I see, and a lot of people use that. So not the eastern part to Gardner, that wouldn't be done,
Right.
okay.
For this grant purposes, I mean,
Yeah,
it could be
yeah, yeah,
done,
I
but we're just not
understand.
seeking.
Thank
money
you.
for that.
Just to follow up on the grant again. I understand, but I'm not applying for the whole thing. Say you're awarded the grant and say it's generous, how quickly are you ready to go with the second half? Do you have the paperwork ready to go? If they've already told you it's a first come, first serve, then have the western half ready, have the western half applied for, but have the eastern half application ready to go. See what I'm saying?
I do see what you're saying. I don't think though, we'd have to be prepared to find that money for that eastern half is the problem.
But if they're, you'll know how generous the grant is with the first half.
Well, the flip side is it, do we need it?
Yeah, that's another question.
Okay, so we did create a 501(c)(3) for the boardwalk to raise funds to contribute, to work with the city and see where we stand. We did ask Victor for the plans, the original plans based on what he submitted, and that's what we wanted to present on our website. That has not gone live yet, but it would be in coordination with you guys. And that would be, you know, hopefully a benefit being a tax deductible. I'm not sure what this, how the, you know, how that works with what the city would do.
But at this point, the council hasn't decided
Right.
on the plan, so you
But we
don't.
still can go ahead and raise funds because you guys.
That's your call, but
Right.
we don't have a plan that you can say, here's what we're
It
gonna
just
do.
wouldn't advertise the whole
So it just
boardwalk.
depends.
Because of the fact-
Absolutely. So because it's public information, we're just giving the information that's been provided. So it's in discussions. When people are involved in this or that they are donating, they stay up to date about what is happening with the situation.
No, I think it's great. I mean, it's a great deal. We just
So
don't
it's
want
not,
to
there's
get,
nothing definitive, of course, it's, but I think you have a community that really wants to make sure this is going to go forward based
as we all
on,
do.
yeah. Yeah. But just so everybody's aware of that.
Thank you.
So any help would be great.
Help with regards to.
Anybody wants to participate, you know, we're happy to.
I guess I'm confused on this, just on this part, because I know we talked about this, Phil and Maggie, is that if people are donating to, let's say, the whole boardwalk or like the western half, and then council decides to go with a staircase, what happens to that money? That's what there seems to be like a potential
Well,
mix,
you know,
some confusion or.
We have the ability to keep, you know, really great track of everything, and we work with our donors. I mean, that's happened in the past. And I hope that the community is able to give feedback on what they would like. And if we're able to raise funds that are there for the whole boardwalk, as I think that people would like from what I'm hearing, and that's something that I hope we can have that in open discussion. But we're here just to see what you guys are wanting to do, but we have the community behind us, and I think we want to all work together to make it happen. I think there's lots of different ways to skin a cat and combine efforts.
Agree. So, yeah, I just think we need to be careful, like you said, with the information we're getting.
Yeah, well,
Excellent. And so it's all public information that comes from the council meetings, and let's keep updating as it goes and keeping people, it's a great informational source.
Love it.
The only question I have in regard to that, I think it's great to have, you know, potential source for fundraising donations, but Rachel, would that have any impact on the grant? If anything like that started ahead of our knowledge of receiving any grant money?
Not necessarily, so we'll request, when I spoke to the grant coordinator, he proposed we request, so they will do 100% of projects. But he did not recommend putting that in the application for 100% for Harbor Springs. So we will, Victor and I will propose 80%, and then hopefully it's not a grant where they'll just say no, they'll counter offer and say, you know, 50 or something like that, hopefully. But from what the application says, there's no real, they want to see that we can make the match in any way possible. So this is the plan.
The one caution about that in general is though, if we do get an award from a grant, they are approving that design that we submitted for. So there's no altering that design. Otherwise we give up that money. So that's something we also have to be careful about.
So I do. Oops. Sorry, I was
You have your phone.
echoing there. Was that me? Oh.
Will someone have their phone?
Zoom on your phone.
Okay.
But Why don't you come up
Come
here?
away from the computer.
Yeah.
I think you're too close to the computer in there.
Where do you want me?
I don't think that's- I think I found it.
I like this for home
There you go.
because when I'm not heard the first time.
My concern is the safety of the children and the kids that use that boardwalk, and I think that the quicker we can get this moving, the better off we are, because I hate to see them using down by Bluff, that intersection. I also think that starting some kind of a fundraising project while we're waiting for the grant is, I mean, time is of the essence. Let's do it. Let's start doing that, because chances are we're not going to get all of the money from the grant. So I think that's a whole 2 months down the road. You never know what we can get in that 2 months or 3 months or January, February time.
And it's a good point. I just think the trade-off is that we don't know what design we're going. So if we're asking people to donate for a boardwalk and council ends up going with a staircase, that's.
Well, I just think it
That's-
needs,
that's our-
right, I think that people want something in place, something that can go from down,
That's our goal.
down, regardless of whether it's a staircase or if it's a quote unquote boardwalk. And that's my ignorance. I'm not really sure what the difference is, but it's something that comes down. And my number one concern is the kids.
Technical question, can't we already provide funds to the city as a tax deductible contribution?
Yes, but it's not the same as a 501c3. It's a different kind of deduction. But Nick, we usually don't say,
A contribution from an individual standpoint to a 501c3, that is tax deductible.
but to the city, it depends.
We can write a letter saying money was donated to the city, then their tax preparers would deem however they treat that as taxable or non-taxable.
We don't have the same status as a 501c3, but we are usually what donations are generally tax exempt, but under a different statute.
Just as a side, contributions I've made to the DDA for projects, my accountant has allowed to be a contribution. So it is an avenue that's available.
Wouldn't we, just question for, because the preservation of what the boardwalk is right now, the layout, don't we ultimately want to maybe go down that road if we can raise the funds? I know with the grant, there's always obligations with the grant. I haven't looked into that information, but don't we want the same layout, the same footprint ultimately?
Well, that's what we're doing with this grant application, the western half first, yeah. So, but I'm assuming if we don't get the money for the grant, that's when council is gonna have to make a decision on how to proceed.
Okay. So it's not off the table that having.
No, absolutely
Okay,
not.
so
It's possible that the funds that the organization gathers could be used to fund the eastern portion.
That's also possible, yeah.
It's possible.
It's possible, it's,
There's a lot of possibilities right
yeah,
now.
it depends on where we are,
Glass half
whatever.
full, that's what we want, glass half full.
Yeah, it depends on how much money we have. Nick and I think we have available in our reserves at the end of fiscal year 2022 or proposed, so. It looks like we have a comment on Zoom. I'll get to that quick.
I think that's what Maggie was saying, like, to work with you guys, because we really would like to see as much of it preserved as possible. And if we know what's happening with the grant, then we know how to move forward. So it's just a communication effort more than anything, just if we stay.
Well, right now, we're in a hurry up and wait mode,
Right, right.
unfortunately, so.
But just that there's no blocks to communicating.
All of this
back and
information is presented and
It's all
discussed
public,
in a public meeting. It's all public information.
Sure.
No blocks.
Right, but things happen also within, a council meeting is 4 weeks apart, so any information or any discussions that could flow between there are welcome. I think that's what we were getting at.
Might be inappropriate to release information that you glean without having it discussed at a council meeting, but that's up to Victor to decide.
I mean, our staff job, we're working on managing the goal, the direction of council. So if they want us to apply for something, we just do that administrative managerial task. So the policy discussions happen here.
They should all happen.
But if you want to talk to me anytime, I mean, come to my office, give me a call.
And we meet every 2 weeks
Yeah.
in general. It's not a month, yeah, so there's only a couple weeks usually in between meetings.
A question from Marinda Miller. Are there any rules and regulations, stipulations from the grant that this is a federal government grant? Are we selling something, the boardwalk, for example, the grant for Marina Park that would give the state of Michigan that was turned down authority to run a portion of our city-owned marina? Are we selling out to the government? No one wants more government in Harbor Springs. We want less.
No.
So if we're talking, I'm assuming similar to what happened with the Harbor Master Building, are there similar conditions in there? And I don't think there are in the grant. So, and Rachel says no. So
I don't think so. No, it's not for this.
I have to get my power course up here.
It's a very different situation.
They give the money and that's that. They're out of it, right?
It's a pretty simple
Okay.
grant compared to others. And the EDA usually doesn't do grants like this. They're usually not in the business of recreation grants, so it's kind of new to them too, which makes it fairly, like grant-wise simple, okay, streamlined.
They're just the administrators on this
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
And on the safety issue, and maybe Chief Kyle could address this, what about, where is it ideal for kids to cross and get into town? Because 119 in state is ridiculous for kids to even attempt to cross. And cars just fly down Judd Hill. So what?
My recommendation would be to take the State Street walkway up and I know it's dangerous, but it's safer than Judd Hill, especially for the next 2 months. That's, I mean, that's where we're sort of like.
Right, or take a sled down the bluff and.
Well, there's some trees.
Yeah.
So we're having a staff meeting on Wednesday, we'll discuss, if we see kids at the corner of State 118, stop and help them get across the line. It'll be on our.
Right, I don't like crossing there. People they don't stop till they're in the intersection. Yeah,
So no, we'll talk about it on Wednesday as well, just
okay,
try to help them out.
okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Well, that one young girl was hit there,
Yeah.
what, 25 years ago?
Yeah.
And she's very disabled still. Yeah. Thanks.
Do the kids come into town? I'm curious, from up top?
Yes.
Just to come into town?
They didn't have school today, so they went to Johann's and have lunch and, yeah.
Okay, so it's not like an everyday occurrence at a certain time of day?
No,
So
there's
they
not a
come-
set
okay.
time, but like in the
Okay.
summer, coming and going,
Well, in the summer,
sailing in the
yeah.
beach and friends' houses and
Yeah.
whatever. But there are also kids who live in town and walk to school, to and from school, and they take the bluff. Or the boardwalk up the bluff. But like today, there was a bunch of kids just walking around town and doing stuff, going to the toy store and whatever, and getting lunch, so.
Okay, I just was curious if there was like a mass time that a bunch of
No,
kids came.
just whatever. Yeah.
Those are
There's
all
kids
day.
in Harbor Springs.
When they're hungry.
They get rides
I
from their
know.
parents.
Our kids used to walk to school.
Oh, that's
down
the
there.
dark ages.
Well, it wasn't.
It was the dark ages. All right, enough on the boardwalk?
Yep.
All right, next.
All right, capital improvements plan presentation. So the 2022, 20 to 2027 capital improvements plan, I'll go over it relatively quickly here. Let the crowd shuffle out. This was prepared about 3 weeks ago. As you know, I'll just start. So it's a 6-year plan. So 6-year plan for capital projects and purchases, and we classify those as over $10,000. It includes necessary projects as well as projects that are desirable. The approval and something that we need to be clear about is that it does not commit the city to any money or doing those projects. It's just a plan, a vision of where we want to get and how we want to get there. It's a requirement of the Michigan Planning Enabling Act, which focuses on structures. So the act actually focuses on just the actual structures, but we also include more inclusive of projects like services and other things in there that we want to see. Just for our purposes, it just helps us out. A better job of planning. Must be approved by both the Planning Commission and City Council. And as I mentioned, it allows us to plan for future projects, understand the importance of each project, and give us an idea of the timeline, what we might expect for those projects. And finally, last but not least, it opens this up to future grants. So capital improvements plans, a lot of places require them for grants. So here's a general process. September, October, the department heads submit their projects to me. I compile that information and distribute to the policy team, which is a mix of staff and board members. A few years ago, we put the mayor, the planning commission chair, and at one point the DDA chair was on there as well. I think we can review that for next year on who's on the policy side of the team, which board members as well as staff members. It's usually Nick and I as the staff members, and Lucas for the DPW director. But so we review those, the policy team reviews those projects in October, November. Then I compile all that information and make the draft CIP. And then November, which planning commission already did, they approve the CIP and then it goes to council. And what we've been trying to do is kind of commingle these with the budget. And so we have to approve this before the budget. So we're looking at December 20th approval adoption right before we adopt the budget. So we have a couple weeks to sit on this and think about it, how it goes together with the budget. So for 22 to 27 overview, we're talking about a total of 74 projects, about $18 million. This is a minimum. It does not include an unknown cost for a project. I think one of the water projects that we have. The average cost per project is about $240,000. For obvious reasons, we included a separate table for the electric projects because there's many of them and they're much more in depth that I can explain on here. So Michael did a good job of explaining why we need those projects. So we'll use his expertise for that. So here's a chart showing from what funds the projects are coming from. And you'll see that it shows that there's 83 projects versus 74. That's because some projects have multiple funds as their sources. So some are done by general fund and electric fund, some are done by streets fund and water fund. So that's how we split that up here. But as you can see, the vast majority come from the electric fund and the general fund. The bulk of the spending, however, primarily comes from the electric fund, and we have about $12 million. You probably saw on Michael McGee's plan about $10 million, but he's looking at the system study. He's not looking at other things like tree removal, some big tree removal projects we might have to secure our lines, de-digitization and other projects that we have that we would put under the electric fund as well. So, but yeah, $12 million, which is about 2/3 of our anticipated spending in the next 6 years is coming from the electric fund. Our heavy years, 23, 24, if we're looking at doing a substation, probably would more realistically be built in 2024, but we would have to purchase most of that material the year before. So we're looking at the high spend year of 2023 of about $7 million. And that, of course, as Michael explained, would be bonded for. So here's some projects for 2022, police tasers and uniforms. So both of those are outdated. And while the funding will come from the general fund, the monies used will be from donations that have been made out specifically to the police department that have been earmarked for the police department. So it does affect our general fund balance, but those monies were earmarked for police purchases. So that's one thing to consider. The skate park remodel will be funded entirely by donations at this point. As of 11/22, we received $60,000 in donations, and we're probably up to $65,000. I think Nate and Rachel have been doing a good job of getting that out there, but we still probably are looking to regroup late winter to see where we're at with that, because they can come back, I believe, Evergreen anytime next year to do that project. So City Hall chiller, that has broken down several times. It's on its last leg. It was put in with this building, so 2002, 2003. We received an estimate in 2020 for about $56,000. We might be able to receive a rebate for that. It depends on what our clean energy servicer provider has for that. We'll check that out. But In order to budget conservatively, we're assuming we're not getting the rebate, so we're just gonna say we're spending $56,000 from that for 2022. Also, we have some $50,000 in spending for tree removal of some tall, skinny, unstable pines, kind of by the Bay Bluffs and skate park. If the wrong winds take those down, they're damaging city infrastructure, skate park, fencing, the road, the electric line. So that's one of those costs that would be split between the general fund and the electric fund. However, this is just,
Why can't our crew do that?
the trees are so tall and unstable that if we just don't have the,
Trucks all reaching.
yeah, I mean, you could, it's just, then we're responsible for blocking off M119. I mean, it's just, yeah, we have a crew of 5 guys. I don't think we would, we'd probably get it done cheaper and quicker with a contracted out. Bike path extension, 2023 project. So we've been talking about the bike path with Harbor Inc. They've had the Wheelway Committee who's been wanting to extend our bike path into downtown Harbor Springs, likely along Bay Street. Right now, by the state, I mean MDOT is just monitoring water flow in the spillway still, and that's volunteers at the Wheelway Committee are, Doug Fuller is monitoring those levels this winter and spring to see what kind of flooding events we have to try to prove it to MDOT that it's safe. So that's still on hold, but we hopefully will know something in 2022, and then the Wheelway Committee can start fundraising for that in Harboring. Kiwanis Tow Road, as we shift some focus to making Kiwanis a winter park, we hope that we can originally relook at that idea for a tow road at Kiwanis Park. So that's in there for 2023. The North FEMA project, we've talked about this in 2019, that there's two parts of the FEMA, the flood spillway project. One was down here by City Hall along the shade drain, and one was up there by DPW building. But that affects DPW, Irish Boat Shop, and the school's property. And at that time, 2019, I don't think Irish Boat Shop and school are ready to go forward with that. So I'm gonna try to restart talks with them in 2022 to see if they want to look for a 2023 project for the North FEMA. So we could split it 3 ways. But you can't do the work without involving, all 3 of our properties have to be involved. So that's why we need all of you in there. The new electric substation, again, 2023, you heard from Michael about that. The big discussion will be the location. Obviously, there'll be other discussions as well, but that would involve planning commission, public hearings, public input, and then a final council approval. So I imagine doing that in 2022 is really figuring out where the location would be. Then tied into that is the 46 kilovolt line rebuild. 2024, I put boardwalk replacement here because this was assuming we didn't get any grant money or any funds to have the funds to do it. It could realistically happen 2022, 2023, 2024, but it depends on the 4 factors: design, scope, overall cost, ability to obtain grants, ability to fundraise, and when a contractor is available. That's something else we haven't really considered yet, is when are the contractors available? And a lot of the original contractors that bid for the boardwalk in 2018 are either no longer interested or no longer
The company's already in business.
out of business. So those are something to keep in mind, that we might have the money to do it in 2023 or 2022, but they might not be available to do it in 2022. Judd Hill Wall, that was kind of to relook at the wall that's holding up supposedly, because we're crumbling, whatever way you want to look at it along Judd Hill. To relook at that to see how we can replace that and what it would cost.
Are we monitoring if it's actually moving, or just
I
deteriorating?
mean, it's just eye by eye. I mean, we haven't actually done a study on it to see if it's moved so recently. So I think that's something we want to do in 2022. Tree base enhancements, again, this was something that's on there that council has talked about, but DDA has put that kind of off a little bit on the back burner. Right now, the flower gardens and the tree bases seems to be an okay substitute. So that'll probably, I push that off to 2024, thinking that it might make the new DDA plan. Harbor Master building, the cost for that are rough estimates again. This idea for this Harbor Master design of changing the bathrooms into a laundry facility and then putting up separate bathrooms, that all depends on when we have the money to build a separate structure at Marina Park. There is also talk about whether or not we want to expand the Harbor Master Building to add bathrooms to it and not do another building. So we have a lot of options here, but right now I think council is, so let's look into a Marina Park structure. Of course, the funding for that is not there right now. So we put that off a few years. And Kiwanis Park upgrades will be to remake Kiwanis Park into Winter Park. As many of you know, in the 70s and 80s, Kiwanis Park was really, 60s, 70s, 80s, was really a winter park. It was a destination for many locals, and it's kind of weaned off in the years as a winter destination. So moving our ice rink there, getting a tow rope, having the warming hut staffed on the weekends or on during the winter, that's a goal. A long-term goal, but for the 3-4 years out, hopefully we can figure what the Parks Board and our master plan and parks comes to on that one. So 26 and 27, these are all basically just placeholder items, most of these. New playground equipment, tennis courts, city amphitheater, these are all things that were identified on surveys that we may or may not want to do. The master parks plan may come up with different recommendations and get rid of some of these or alter them. Same thing in 2027. There's, dog park is still a hot issue of having a dog park. A lot of people want one, a lot of people don't. An observation deck at a tourist park. That's not a high cost item. It's not a necessary item, but it's something just, as a good overlook over the stadium and the bay there. So, but these again these are not projects that are necessary right there. They're just wish list projects and I put them as placeholders just so we have an idea that, they may or may not happen, but let's just think about them. Then there's the 2 electric projects there, substation transformer replacement, as well as some electric projects. So those are just basic overview of the capital improvements plan. You also have the actual document itself. I picked pink this time as a presentation color because the other colors were blue, so I just wanted to make it fair. But so if you guys have any questions about it, I would take some time to think about it, get some public comment on it, about the items there. But really just think about when we go onto the budget, how this plays in with our budget, because as you notice, we didn't put a lot of money in our general fund expenditures in 2022. City Hall chiller for capital improvements plan and then tree removal. That's really all the capital projects that we have from the general fund. So if you have any questions about it, I know Al, you made clear earlier today about the language about where the substation is going to go. And I do have in this, I took from Michael McGeehan's recommendation.
I already figured it out.
Okay, all right. So, I can strike that downtown language because we don't know the location. And the capital improvements plan, I said it would be downtown, but downtown Harbor, a lot of people tend to think of the entire city as downtown because their zip code is Harbor Springs, but really downtown Harbor Springs is really CBD district, which is like 3 blocks. So it might not have the same meaning to Michael McGeehan as it did to other people. Any questions? Probably a lot.
It's really gratifying to have a 5-year plan put together where the short term can be discussed and budgeted and the long term can roll forward. So it's a tool that I think the city really needed.
All right, well, I guess time.
Well done.
All right. Any comments from the public, Matt? Want to get some?
That's from the public.
I don't see any on Zoom. So, all right, I will move on then to the budget presentation. This is a 2022 proposed budget and a 2021 amended budget. Again, this is proposed draft. So this year we're proposing some modest cuts. So this is the first time we actually really looked into, Nick and I as a team here looking into some more than typical cuts. So this is just proposed draft. We're working with what we have. So I know council members, the public might have different opinions, but this is a first go at it, and we can take comment here and think about it, and then we'll have the public hearing on December 13th. Take more public comment from at that hearing, and then give Nick and I direction on what you want to see. So I'll do the presentation first. I did a presentation this year because we're actually proposing some substantial changes to the budget. So it's better to visualize with with that, so. All right. So the three main goals for budgeting, one is to cover the basic costs of government services and operations. That's, zoning, assessing, elections, basic things that we need to run the government that were required by state law, city charter. The second one is to maintain or replenish our reserve funds to cover services and operations due to unexpected losses in revenue or emergency situations. And then finally, replenish our reserve funds for capital infrastructure projects. And those are broken down, as I explained, in the capital improvements plan, necessary projects such as replacing roofs, parking lots, air conditioner, boardwalk, versus desirous projects, the marina park structure, tennis courts, ice rink, dog park, skate park. Someone said that. What does it deliver to serve? What does it cost to deliver services and operate government? So in general fund, right now, we're at $3 million. And this is basically what it covers on your right there. City hall staff, police department, parks, brush and leaf pickup, accounting, assessing, zoning, legal, sidewalks, tree management, parking lot selections. Major street, local street funds, $700,000. Again, this is for street construction, maintenance of our streets, snow and ice control, drain maintenance, street sweeping, signs, markers. Fire department, wages, equipment, essential fire services, the building and grounds of the fire department. Historical fund, this is our Andrew J. Blackbird Museum, and that used to be $35,000 or so. But since our curator no longer works there, and then we're in the talks with the Historical Society to begin looking to see how we can transfer over management of our collection and operations to them. That money can fluctuate, but right now we're putting in $15,000 for basic maintenance of that building. But we don't have it staffed. Downtown, the DDA, of course, Mark explained how DDA funds are accumulated, but that's, that money goes toward administration, events, and then infrastructure enhancements as well as downtown enhancement. The electric fund, it's at $4.8 million annually is what we're spending, at least this year is what we're predicting we need to spend. Michael McGee kind of went over this, but you have utility billing and meter reading, purchasing power, line maintenance, street lights, calling out for misdig, security lights, tree trimming, line extension system, engineering. So those costs all go into electric fund. Similar with water sewer, same kind of thing. Billing and meter reading, misdig, hydrant maintenance, well maintenance, service lines, turn-ons and turn-offs. Waterfront fund, this is our harbor master staff, docks and moorings, the waterfront parks and grounds, and marine law enforcement, which is a minor part of the cost, but it's still part of the cost there. The equipment fund, this is essentially all our big equipment that we use in the city, your police vehicles, your DPW vehicles like the snow plows, their basic trucks and tractors, our electric vehicles, their bucket trucks, and then parks and grounds equipment. So $12.5 million is the approximate cost to annually provide services and maintain some of our city infrastructure. And the reason I say some of our city infrastructure, because this is not including our desirous projects, this costs, like we're not talking about capital improvement projects like the skate park or whatnot. This is just to keep government going as is, as we have it right now. We should also keep in mind that some of the costs of these are not just for inside city limits, because our electric system, our water sewer system extend well beyond our city limits. So some of these costs go to maintaining our systems outside our city limits. So what operations are necessary? And that's a policy question for council really to decide. There's two major schools of thought. I'm sure many of you know this. One is less government is better. Only provide the services and amenities that individuals cannot be realistically expected to provide or attain for themselves. Others believe more government is better. So provide as many services and amenities to ensure the health, safety, and welfare of the public and do the most good for the most people. There's a constant push and pull between these schools of thought. And usually most governments end somewhere in the middle. Very few are on either extreme, but how we get to that middle is different for every city. So where does Harbor Springs stand in that sense? There's a lot on here, but I broke it down into services and amenities that other municipalities provide that we don't, and then services on the right-hand side that we provide that other places don't. So bigger cities, other cities have public transportation, social services, garbage removal, housing, rental inspections, a library. We do have a Lansing library kind of as our library, but we don't have a library in here that's funded by the city inside the city limits. Telecommunications communication and cable, natural gas, general economic development, community development, recreation programming. We just started that a little bit, and cultural facilities. What we do have that a lot of other communities don't have is electric department, airport that we kind of run. It's outside our city limits, but we're involved in that. Harbor master, downtown development, lifeguards, tree board. We do have a museum. We have one, and housing. We've just begun contracting with Housing North for to help address some housing issues collaboratively with other communities. So the question of whether there should be more or fewer services and amenities is a council decision. So, and I believe that there's 4 questions that have to be asked. One is, what are we legally required to provide by state law or by city charter? Legally, we have to do elections. Legally, we have to do assessing, have to do zoning. Those are things that we legally have to do. What does the public want more or less of? How can the city deliver or take away that service amenity, and what would the effects be of taking away that service or adding that service? And how will the city pay for those additional services and amenities? And as we explain later, really right now, we city staff, I don't think we're in a position to add more services and amenities. We can shift things around, but we're not in a position to add and expand. So we're actually in a position where we need to reduce. So the second key point of budgeting is reserve funds to cover services and operations. Each fund should have the reserves to cover operational costs in the event that the city faces a sudden or significant revenue loss. And I believe they can be broken down in these 3 different ways. We kind of heard our Mark Beauchamp of our electric rate study talking about the minimum reserve for the electric fund, what absolutely was minimum. So there's a minimum reserve, then there's your ideal reserve, which would ideally make Nick feel comfortable when he's looking at the budget. And then there's the excess reserve. So when you're accumulating so much money that you should be reinvesting it in the community, but you're not. So that's called the excess. I think we should strive for the ideal mark. I mean, obviously you want to have the minimum for bond issuance and stuff like that, and to cover emergency repairs, but you want to strive for that ideal. The benefits of that is when you have an ideal reserve fund, your balance leads to higher bond rating, which leads to lower cost to borrow for projects. And as you saw, Mark Beauchamp talking about a 5% interest rate for a potential $5 million loan for electric substation, that's a pretty good bond rate, Nick will tell you that, I think. Yeah. More cash on hand to respond to emergencies and help maintain a stable tax rate and allow for strategic planning for future needs. So that's why you want to hit that ideal mark. But that ideal, it varies from city to city, from municipality to municipality, from nonprofit to nonprofit. A municipality that has the ability to increase its millage rate may not need as high of a reserve balance, because if some emergency happens, they can increase their tax rate. We can't do that. So that's why we probably need to have a higher minimum reserve or higher ideal reserve, because we don't have that ability right now. Talking with Nick, our ideal reserve balance should be 12 months. Our minimum reserve balance should be 9 months. That is slightly higher than other communities. Usually are in 6 to 8 month range for the minimum, but being where we're at with our inability to increase the tax rate, we need to have a little slightly higher reserve balance. Where are we at? This is just a comparison where we're at with our funds and where we should be for the minimum. You see general fund, we're right about there. Some of the funds are exceeding it. Some of them are not meeting it. So how much money do we need to get to an ideal reserve fund balance in each? This is ideal funds. We say general fund, $600,000, major street, $50,000, local street, $50,000, electric fund, $1.8 million. Obviously, when we do the bond issuance, we'll have, that will no longer be an issue. We'll have that money in there. Waterfront equipment, historical and DDA, those are all, they have sufficiently enough funds to keep their operations running for a year or even 2. So those are really healthy funds. So then we have the third option of budget, the third aspect of budgeting, and that's a reserve balance for capital improvement projects. And I'm focusing here on general fund because a lot of the capital improvement projects in our other funds are really necessary projects. Substation, line systems, water, sewer mains, those are necessary projects. So right now I want to focus on the general fund because we have $0 for those capital projects really right now. Our minimum balance is at about that 9 months, our reserve balance, and we just don't suggest spending any money until we build up that reserve to the ideal part. City does not have a separate capital reserves balance, as I said. But we could, and I think we want to establish such a balance. We don't have a policy, but I think we should have one, and Nick and I are gonna look into that for next year. But we might want to have a policy that says, once our operating reserve balance reaches a 9-month threshold, we earmark any money, any surplus of that for capital projects. And that capital project could be a necessary capital project like boardwalk, or it could be something, fun in the future, like a dog park. If that's fun for some people. I think the minimum in that capital reserve fund balance should be about $100,000-$200,000. But again, it depends on what our goals are. If we have a lot of projects, we want to put that up higher. If we have aging infrastructure, we want to even put that minimum higher, because this building, of course, is getting older, and by older, I mean, they're at 20 years old almost. So the roofs need to be replaced soon, parking lots here. So some of the aging infrastructure, you might want to have a higher minimum balance there.
Just on that last topic, isn't that something that you would want to develop, looking towards the future and known capital improvement maintenance issues that you have? If we talked about this when we originally talked about the boardwalk, if we had put in a reserve for the boardwalk over the 50-year life of the boardwalk, we wouldn't be talking about funding. It would be sitting there in a reserve. As the buildings are aging, what the depreciation schedule is, what the maintenance schedule is. That fund could have had input into it, including the chiller.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't set and I'm not implying that you would. It shouldn't be set arbitrarily. It should be based on a projection, based on your capital plan, but also on your infrastructure plan.
Yep. That should be,
Things would be great.
ideally it should be.
Yep.
Ideally, also, you want a minimum in there because of unknown emergency situations.
Exactly.
Yep. So that's. So as I said, we'll eventually propose a reserve fund balance, but for right now, we're suggesting that we maintain 9 months of operating reserves in our fund balances and saving surpluses for capital projects and planning for those projects. But that's something we need to look at next year as we create that policy.
Nick, does the state, I don't know if they dictate, do they recommend a certain level for these balances?
No, I don't think there's anything really written in any state requirements. Auditors recommend anywhere between 8 and 12. So 9, and 9 kind of sticks out because the city only can collect any money in the general fund once a year. When taxes go out in the summer is when the city collects its money. And then there's not another dollar that comes into the general fund until next year at that time.
Yes, that's the time frame.
So when you're running cash, you have to make sure you have enough cash to get through one more year before taxes come in again.
So we're going to explain some of the significant changes in our proposed 2022 budget. And normally we see minor fluctuations on a year-to-year basis, but we're proposing modest reductions in our general fund. We're also proposing shifting some of our monies toward maintenance of buildings, parks, grounds, and trees. I think maintenance, we all know that maintenance prolongs the life and value of city property and saves on costs in the long run. So ensuring we consistently maintain what we own, I think that should take priority over new builds and initiatives, as well as over certain amenities and services, because we'll end up paying more in the long run for these deteriorating city infrastructure if we don't maintain it. So general funds, what you'll see in the budget, some revenue changes, administrative fees and taxes are really some of the changes. We're expecting about $140,000 less revenue compared to 2021. Some significant changes in expenditures are the city manager's department, city hall, police department, brush and refuse pickup, leaf pickup, beach operations, ice rink, sled hill, parks and grounds, trees and bluffside management, and community promotions. So I'm going to go over those in detail right now. So in 2021, if you remember, we increased administrative fees by $100,000. And so that was about 28%. And administrative fees, again, are those fees that we charge to our other city funds to help serve those funds, to help do the work for that. So my time, Nick's time, so those are what administrative fees are. So when we do work for the waterfront, when we do work for the electric system or the water sewer system on our end, or any other staff members end, that gets charged as administrative fees. We're proposing to reducing administrative fees by $40,000. That's 10% because Some of those other funds, like our electric, streets and waters, they're gonna need those money for future costly projects. So really what we've been doing is taking money from other funds to support our general fund. And now those other funds now need money to do projects. So it's kind of, it hurts us. I'm like, as I mentioned at our last meeting, one of our last meetings, our electric fund gives about $300,000 to our general fund. So that's about 10% of our general fund is funded by our electric department. If for the last 20 years, we have been saving that $300,000 in our electric fund, we would have had that $6 million to do the substation and whatnot. So there's the catch-22 right there. So our budgeted administrative fees for 2022 is $430,000, which is still 17% greater than 2020 revenues. I just don't think we can continue propping up general fund just by charging fees to other city funds, because like I said, it's hurting those other funds and our ability to do projects there.
How does this, Victor, does this imply a change in the work that the staff will be doing for those funds, or just a reallocation of money?
So when we first did this for 2020 to 2021, we had really no idea what it actually costs to do all this work. So we're trying to figure that out, exactly what it costs to, those administrative fees have not been changed in how long?
25 years.
It was 25 years. So we were contributing the same amount of money 25 years ago from those funds to our general fund.
The dollar amount.
The dollar amount. So there's really no easy way to figure out.
Well, you're tracking it now.
We're doing a better
But
job of
to my
it.
question, it doesn't imply a change in process, it's just reallocation of dollars.
Reallocation dollars. Yeah. Taxes, between 2017 and 2021, the tax revenue increased by $160,000 or 10%. Over that same period, city expenditures increased by $550,000 or 21%. So given that taxes are about 60% of our general fund revenue, taxes would need to cover about $330,000 of our increased expenditures in order to present a balanced budget. But property tax revenue is increasing at half the rate of expenses. Which shows us, as we mentioned before, we need to raise taxes or cut expenses. So for 2022, we are budgeting for a $50,000 increase in tax revenue, which is a 3% increase from 2021. The city manager department, we are seeing a $55,000 decrease due to no longer having the assistant to the city manager position. City Hall, we have one capital project, as I mentioned, slated, and that's the malfunctioning chiller. As I mentioned, that's $56,000. Those costs could have gone up because it's about a year and a half old quote, but we'll look to see if they have to rebate for that. Police department, I mentioned this in the capital improvements plan, but there's really two major expenses that are contributing to that $54,000 increase, and that's outdated uniforms. And also half of the department's tasers are no longer operational. So the police officers are sharing tasers, and it is protocol for officers to have a less lethal option. So you really need some sort of less lethal option. And as mentioned, the funding for those two purchases will come from the donations that have been made to the police department over several years. Brush and leaf pickup. So we are proposing eliminating both the brush and leaf pickup for 2022 and the foreseeable future. Cost savings are approximately $75,000. Those costs are distributed between equipment rental, operating supplies, and labor. So with the labor regards, we're talking about shifting some of that labor cost toward maintenance of our property, including the streets, sidewalks, parking lots, grounds, trees, et cetera. On occasion, over the last 15 years, the city has discussed the option of asking voters to approve a special millage for leaf, brush, and refuse pickup. That might be a future revenue option, but at this point, it would be such a small, it's about a total of, if you're looking at recycling with brush and leaf pickup, we're talking about $140,000 or so, $135,000 for overall cost. So it'd be a $500,000 kind of situation there. Beach operations, we are proposing the temporary elimination of the lifeguards. This will remove about $55,000 from our beach operations. Some of that money would be shifted to operation maintenance. So we still need someone to maintain the bathrooms and the beach there. So we have some maintenance staff. And we'd also need someone to keep the beaches open and clean, the bathroom open and clean. We talked to an insurance provider. They stated that even without lifeguards, we could keep the raft And we would post signage informing people to swim at their own risk. And lifeguards are not on duty. We probably have to look at alternate ways to have some safety measures out there at the beach. The ice rink. So we're proposing eliminating this for the next couple of years or so. It's a small reduction in cost, about $16,000. But those costs can vary depending on the weather and how much it takes staff to make, how much time it takes them to make the ice, and then how many employees we can actually find to actually manage it and operate it. Some years are good, some years aren't as good. We were going to indefinitely cancel it starting in 2023 due to construction of the proposed concrete skate park in 2022. And until we can find a new home for it, which right now is planning stages, is Kiwanis Park. So it eventually was going to go, whether it was this year or next year, it was going to be temporarily halted. I think also by closing the ice rink for this year, it's saving some time, money from deconstructing and moving the skate park ramps, because that takes a lot of time. They spend a lot of time deconstructing those and moving those. So
That would be above the 16,000.
yes. Sled Hill, we are shifting some of the ice rink money though to the Sled Hill because we want to go back to Kiwanis Park, making that transition into a winter destination, park destination for locals. And the idea is to have some staff there on weekends to oversee sledge, can have concession stands, get some small revenue in there for holding those concession stands. So it's an opportunity to refocus on Kiwanis Park, but we'll probably talk more about that when the Parks Board is formed and see where the Parks Board wants to recommend to council how we want to go, what direction we want to go in. So salaries and wages for 2022 in Parks and Grounds are increased by $30,000, but there's a couple of reasons for this. And one is we're shifting away from service to private property owners, and we are going toward, sorry, I lost my screen there for you guys. Park operations, such as maintenance of our grounds, buildings, and et cetera. Part of the increase is also due to moving from a half-time Parks Director to a full-time Parks Director. But remember, we saved money by eliminating the assistant to the city manager position. So it was really a wash. Actually, we saved money from doing that. So we took away money from the city manager line item, $55,000, and added about an extra $20,000 to $25,000 for a full-time Parks Director in the Parks line item. Tree and bluffside management, we're proposing a modest increase of $7,000 on tree management maintenance. This, like I said, will primarily include maintenance, watering, trimming, and some staff training for pruning and trimming. We have a tree inventory that we should maintain and expand so we understand potential tree issues and plan for maintenance of our existing inventory. The tree board kind of talked about this, and some thought it was a good idea, and some didn't think the expanded inventory really right now is a high priority. So, but it's one thing that we do recognize that when we have the money, that we should expand our inventory, because we need to be looking out at, we have to know what we have and what condition those trees are in. But I think, as with all of our other maintenance, all our other infrastructure, ensuring that we maintain those trees and make sure they're in a healthy situation, and they're not posing any kind of danger or risk to people or property, that saves us money in the long run. So it's, again, shifting our mindset toward maintaining what we have before we expand. A note here about bond payments. So currently we spend about $75,000 annually the last few years to pay back our debt for the bond we took for a city hall and police department building. In 2023, we'll be done with those. We'll finish those bond payments. So that'll have freed up $75,000 in our general fund. But in 2 years, I don't know what revenue is going to look like and what costs are going to look like. So it seems like a substantial amount of money. We might be able to bring back some of the services that we're reducing, aside from any other potential revenue sources. But again, because of the Headley situation and the way that the taxes work, we're eventually going to end up back with expenses outpacing our revenue. So we're reducing spending by about, this is our proposal, about $130,000, which is about 4.3% of the budget compared to last year. This will bring our reserve balance above the recommended 9-month minimum, allowing us to use that extra money on a capital improvement project, such as a boardwalk, or to keep it as an emergency funds. However, we have to propose a reduction in services to pay for that project. So without proposing these reductions in services and amenities, we don't have that reserve fund to chip in some money for the boardwalk right now. So it's a catch-22 there. Future cuts, things that have been talked about and discussed from varying people, 24/7 police coverage. If the situation doesn't improve, we do have a great police department, and I think we all recognize our community is very safe, but we do have to, eventually we'll have to look at all options if we still run into budgeting issues. So recycling pickup, part-time park staff, that would force bathrooms to close or not be cleaned as often. Garbage canisters to remain overfilled for longer. So there's the consequences of these things. So reducing skate park staff, but that would also reduce revenue because skate park is one of our only parks that actually brings in revenue. So here you go, you have that catch-22. And then Deer Park, it's a small expense, but we'd have to look at everything. The need to go forward with the necessary CIP projects still prevent us from building up a surplus. So how many more services, amenities will we need to cut in order to replace a roof or redo a parking lot? I mean, that's just where we're at right now. So cutting services to build up our reserve funds, it's not sustainable. And I've talked about this before, but if property values decrease by 20%, the city will lose upwards of $325,000 in revenue. That's 11% of our budget. And then you're talking about 38% of our police budget, 5 full-time employees, shutting down our parks. I mean, you obviously you wouldn't want to do one of those completely, but those are what that amounts to. That amount of money amounts to that kind of cut. So that's when we'll have to decide between making those major cuts or depleting our reserves so we can cover those, or over the course of a few years. And at that point we'd be in a dire situation. We're not in a dire situation here, but we're trying to prevent ourselves from going there. So and this is something that we've talked about. So what are we not cutting and why? And the one big one is employee health benefits. Our union agreements mandate that the city pays at least 80% of the employee's healthcare premium. Last year, after we recognized the effects of the take home for pay for many employees had been decreasing over several years because the cost of healthcare and the cost of our pension liabilities had increased. So council decided to agree to cover 100% of the premiums to review that commitment annually. I think, council can decide to lower that to 80% without violating the union agreement, but I think there's a few good reasons why not to do this yet. One is we're going to be entering union negotiations in 2023, and this could be a good bargaining chip or a good talking point. Usually unions tend to ask for more, and in tight situations, government tends to ask for less, demands cuts or reductions. So the healthcare premium coverage could be a good topic of discussion. But I think a bigger topic here is our median annual salary for full-time city employees whose health benefits are paid through a job fund. That's their salary. 5 employees make less than $49,000 annually. So they're not, the benefits really are what make this job for many of our employees. Having these benefits is what attracts them here. Usually that's the number one question we get in interviews is what are your benefits look like? Because that's what all municipalities are competing for, a similar pool of employees.
This is salary, this isn't burdened with benefits.
This is this is without benefits, right? This is just salary. Another aspect to look at a different perspective is the number of full-time employees that live in the city limits. So, the average house in the city limits is selling for $450,000. A salary of $56,000 for one person is not going to make you afford to be able to live in the city. But then yet, a lot of people and council members have expressed, we want people to live close or in the city to be part of the community where you work in. But for many, it's just realistically not possible. So from this way, obviously there are some employees that can afford to live in the city that don't, and others probably just don't want to. But I think it's a messaging situation. So when you tell an employee, yes, we want you to work for us. No, we're not going to pay you to live here. It's a mixed message, right? We're this great community, and I know we can't control the housing market. That's just not within council's control. But I think it is in our control to, you know, at least to be helpful to our employees. I know for those who've been following the Harbor Springs Sewer Authority situation with the search for executive director, we're in a situation where people are not going to move up here for lower than average state rates of pay when they have to pay much higher costs of living. I mean, this will turn into a problem for, if you cut benefits, it's harder to find employees to work here. It's just the bottom line. We have a hard enough time getting employees to come up here. Ask Kyle for part-time officers. You can't find any. I mean, it's just part-time work in the Parks Department. You can't hardly find any. So it's an issue that we need to face with. So that's why I'm not recommending this right now. But I think if our situation gets to the point where we need to start making some bigger cuts, then yeah, this is something we're going to have to look at. We're going to definitely have to look at the benefits, because Nick can explain a little bit maybe about the pensions, but that's another liability right now that we're running into.
Yeah, I'm sure you've all heard in the past with Detroit and bigger cities downstate with their ginormous unfunded pension liabilities. The city has a pension somewhat similar to those types of down there, but we're funded. We're not fully funded, but we need to keep putting to this to stay above 65% funded for the pension. So yes, as these pension costs go up, we've been shifting over the last, 5 to 10 years, that burden of these pensions onto the employee, taking away from the cost of the city, which it had traditionally been, and pushing the cost of the pension liabilities onto a withholding from a person's paycheck. So they're funding more of the pension now than the city is, or ever has been.
So that is.
We're trying to pass some of that burden onto the employees. But it gets to a point where when that happens, then we're gonna lose employees. So it's a difficult concept.
Yeah. Other funds, and I'm not going to go in detail with the costs and changes in other funds. They're relatively minor. You saw the capital improvements plan projects, what we're spending on the water, sewer, streets, and electric fund. We're not having any major changes in services and amenities in those funds. Those are kind of operating on their own as they should. So kind of to put council's role versus city staff's role, or Nick's and I role. So council's role is a policy role for the budget, right? Is what services and amenities does council want to keep, reduce, or eliminate? What projects does council want to do now or push off on later? And what kind of surplus and deficit does council want to see, or will they tolerate? So, are you okay with a small deficit, or do you want to see a big surplus? That's the big policy goals. Then the city clerk and I, we figure out how to keep or reduce those services and amenities. We'll advise council on the feasibility of finding the funds for those projects. And then we'll add or reduce to meet council's goals, and advise council on how a surplus or deficit will impact our financial position. So those are the distinguishing parts of the two roles: policies, council, and then we do that work to figure out how to meet council's policy goals. So that's what I have. And then the budget, the budget is online for everyone. It's also, council, you have your physical copies with you. So
I think there's a few up here too.
yeah, if anyone wants to pick up, there's copies of the budget right there, physical copies. So we will have a public hearing on the 13th, but you can still discuss and take comment right here if you want to. Traditionally, council has not really discussed the budget here. They usually wait till the public hearing, but they do take public comment from anyone that might not be able to be at that hearing, or just might want to say something about the budget right now. So if you have any questions right now for me or Nick on how we kind of put this together, or thoughts?
Pretty self-explanatory. Well done.
Good overview.
Any questions?
Really good overview.
Well, I have some questions, but some of them might be public hearing. I mean, I'm struggling with the leaf brush not pickup and what that's gonna mean to what happens with all the leaves in town. That's just a question I think we need to look at. I also think that's something that local residents use a lot. So to cut that, I understand the cost, of course, but I'm struggling a little bit with that and what that's gonna mean, and if there isn't a different way to handle that. I think at one point, if residents rake their own leaves, it was free pickup. If it was a company, they didn't pick them up.
Used to be able to burn the leaves.
Yeah, you used to be able to burn them. Right, and the companies used to not be, their leaves weren't picked up. If it was a yard person that raked them, they were responsible for picking them up and dealing with them. So I'm just curious if we might have some other options rather than just canceling that across the board. That's one thought. Also, a question of if it's a good time to spend money on a sled hill when we're cutting a lot of other places. Is that $10,000 a good use? It's just a question. You know, if this is the right year, right time to do that or not. And I looked at some of the reserves in the funds, the high ones, waterfront, equipment, historical, and DDA are all above the recommended reserves. So what are we doing with that money, or should we be doing something with some of that money? Especially, I think the high, well, there's a lot in historical.
So the historical has a lot because you're saving up that money and that balancing when there's a major need for that building, right? So that wouldn't come from the general fund. So there's $185,000.
Right.
If you need to make a major fix to the roof or any part of the building, that fund would cover it.
Okay.
The historical fund has been solely funded by the general fund since its inception. Every year we budget a $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 transfer to fund that.
Okay, right.
Now that we're shifting gears and maybe going with the historical society, that potentially money would come back to the general fund.
Okay.
And that fund could either go away. I would recommend maybe leaving it there with a fund balance, much smaller
Much
one,
smaller, yeah.
to maintain the structure.
Yeah.
We don't want
There
a
was
city
just a
hall.
big difference in what was recommended and also on the waterfront.
So the waterfront, we were trying to save money for the harbor master building.
Right, and I knew that. But that's another one that there's a lot of money just.
So there's also a lot of money in that one because we can't buy insurance for the docks. So if there's something happens to them, we have to pay for it ourselves. So we keep, we've got a target, I forget what it is, but we maintain that money so that we can pay for a catastrophic thing.
So then maybe the recommended balance should be higher. I mean, I don't like to see things where the recommended is 250,000 and there's 700 and some thousand.
And that's very possible with the price of everything
So
increasing
maybe
over the last 5
recommended
years.
needs
The
to be
one
closer
dock
to what we want in
could
it.
easily be a
So the recommended was also for, so there's different ways of looking at it. Kind of John had mentioned about, how are we coming to these values? Is it project based or is it just based on, what's ideal target? So if we're looking at specific projects, that recommended number will change. But if we're looking just to what it costs yearly to operate, so it costs us $500,000 to $600,000 yearly, that's where that's in the presentation, that's where that recommended budget came from.
Okay.
But if you're looking, you have to put that on top of that, the capital improvement project. So there's two things we're looking at. What did it cost to actually operate and do those services and maintain those amenities? And then what it costs to do those projects, like replace the docks, do the
So
harbor
we
master.
probably need to be consistent in how we set them so that the numbers make sense. when
Right.
You look at.
And that's why we're looking at next year doing some sort of policy,
Okay.
some capital improvements and funding policy.
I think
We don't have
we're
that.
headed that way.
Yeah.
We're just not there
I
yet.
had the same discussion in past years about the Harbor Commission. I said, well, this doesn't make any sense. What's all this money doing? Sitting here.
Yeah.
And it was politely explained to me, we self-insure. And 1 or 2 docks wipes out that fund.
And what about the equipment fund? There's a lot of money in that too, compared to recommended balance.
The equipment fund is funded only by equipment that is rented amongst all the other city funds. So when you see the guys driving down the street on Third Street, which is a
Right.
local street, that street fund pays the equipment fund to rent that vehicle.
Okay,
So you'll see equipment rental throughout all the funds citywide. That revenue was recognized by the equipment fund, and that is used to replace plow trucks and bucket trucks and the state, the rates that we charge amongst the other funds for that equipment is set by the state of Michigan. We can only charge X amount of dollars per hour for a truck running on the trunk line.
Mhm.
So then all municipalities just charge that same rate across the whole city. I think if you look and there's CIP, we've got some expenditures out there.
there's a tractor and a.
But I mean, in 3 to
vehicle.
5 years,
Yeah.
so
Well, there's police cars every year. There's a new police car every year.
Almost every year.
Almost every year, and there's some other. But that balance, again, is out of whack. with
It
what
is a
the
little bit out of
recommended
whack,
is.
but
Yeah, it's just one of the
it
ones,
should be maybe the recommended.
should be higher.
Right, because I know in the next 2 to 3 years, I think Lucas said we need a couple new plow trucks, and those are not your $40,000 pickups, they're several $100,000.
So the one other question, well, actually I have two more. On the fire budget, there are two different pages for the fire budget. Can that be explained real easily? Or is
Yes,
that okay?
yes, the city of Harbor Springs, probably in the inception of the fire authority, chose to take care of all the bookwork, pay all the bills, do everything, payroll, everything for our volunteer fire department.
Okay,
And then that in turn, those expenses are the operating, which you would see in right there.
right, yeah,
That section, fire
Okay.
department.
Yep.
That amount at the end of the year gets split between Little Traverse, West Traverse, and the city based on runs and amount of housing units.
okay,
So out of that, whatever budget is, we've got down at the bottom of
230 or something like that.
240 grand or whatever it is.
okay,
That will then be charged out based on runs to the different townships. The second page of that is the capital portion of the fire authorities. They also, the board, fire authority board has decided we need to keep our equipment up and running and
Right.
new and
yeah,
safe.
yep,
So they said, okay, on top of reimbursing everybody for reimbursing the city for our operations, we will each contribute $50,000 a year
okay,
towards future capital outlay items. That's what this is.
okay.
That's the capital portion of it.
And then there are wages or salaries for fire department, and everybody refers to it as a volunteer fire department. So who do we pay on the fire department? I'm just,
They're volunteer, they're not volunteers like Days of Old. Well, I guess in my mind they are. They get about $115 a month.
That's how much.
okay, so they're paid a small amount
We'll
each
call it
month.
paid on call.
Okay, okay, I just have never asked that question.
Still a volunteer, but the average fireman, like I get $13,000 as fire chief.
Yeah.
The captains get roughly $3,500 a year.
Okay, so they're,
The fireman gets $2,500.
okay, so they're just paid to be on call. I just didn't know that, so I couldn't make sense. And then can you tell me what community promotion? There's a bunch of different community promotions in the budget. Can you tell me what that is?
Christmas lights.
Christmas lights.
Things that we donate maybe to, for example, the tree of the
Tree
garden
cruising.
club or the chamber foundation
Okay.
for fireworks or things like
Flowers
that.
to the.
Okay.
Flower.
Okay, I just didn't know what those
Yeah.
things were. Okay, all right, thank you. Thanks. What's got?
Whoever comes with their hat in hand.
Okay, all right, got it. Thank you. Thanks.
And the big expense on the wage is because with the fire department, we've never actually budgeted for a full team of guys getting paid full amount.
Okay,
So that was the reason for the
there was a big jump.
big jump
Yeah, okay.
there, because we've never actually,
You've actually got more firemen on the ground than you've
right now we
ever.
got 25 people on the roster.
Okay.
So they were actually getting paid full amount. They all vary between rookie, this, that, and the other thing.
Okay,
But it's just one of those things that it's never been looked at.
okay.
So that was the reason for the jump this year.
I was reading the lines and I just didn't understand where it came from. Thanks. Thanks.
We're still trying to pay off a $1 million ladder truck, so.
Thank you.
We do have a comment Zoom. Jeff James, great presentation with a $500,000 increase. It would have raised about $145,000 the first year. Looks like you would have had to cut either way. Now go pick projects and tell the taxpayers how many mills need to run it and for how long. In some cases, in my opinion, people support this way to increase funds to the city. Mayor, if you want to open it up to anyone.
Public comment?
Questions?
I was wondering, are there any potential new revenues that are built into the budget, or don't you do that? I'm referring to what I've heard about maybe parking. or
That's not
whatever
built
else.
into this
That's
because
not
we
built-
haven't presented
Okay.
any kind of final plan on that
Okay.
to council. So,
Victor, there was a notice or a note in the chamber newsletter under the city's heading, where the city had applied for and received a $252,000 COVID grant and received half of that payment. I haven't heard anybody talk about.
We've never
that.
received a COVID grant, that we received a 2,500, I think, from the
This
catastrophe.
is 126,000 that was just.
That was the American Rescue Plan Act, and we received $126,000 from that. We received half of.
I haven't heard where that fits
So-
into the budget.
I'll tell you exactly when he showed our presentation that said that we actually are going into 2021 with $140,000 overage.
Uh-huh.
That's where that came from.
And so the balance, another 126,000, when does that come?
We only get 126,000 total.
Okay,
So we got half of that right now, but we have to put it in according to state. To put all 126,000 into it now, but that, and we'll have to talk about how to spend that money at a future meeting next year, because we have a couple years to decide what we're gonna spend it on, and then a couple years after that to actually spend it. And really, it's limited to what we can spend it on, and honestly, looking at what we have, it probably can only be spent on a water sewer project. Because the other criteria is you have to spend it on, you can spend it on a general fund project if you were severely impacted by COVID, and our finances haven't been impacted by COVID. They've been impacted by other things, but not by COVID, so that limits to what we can spend our money on, but we'll have that conversation.
I was gonna say, I'm surprised to hear myself say that I somewhat agree with Jeff James that maybe we should think about a millage for some of this stuff instead of just struggling and cutting and with Nancy on the leaf and brush pickup.
That's what we presented that at the revenue discussion, several options, so it's on the table.
Is it not possible to add like $1 a month to the city utility bill to cover that expense?
No, those utility bills are specific for those specific funds, so for electric and for water, sewer, those wouldn't be able to cover that. You could do something similar to that if you wanted, a special assessment.
Special assessment. Yeah, there's all sorts of different alternatives, but it doesn't really fix the major problem. Is when property tax values go down 20%, then what?
No, but I'm just talking on your utility bill, just add a special assessment like $1 or $2 a month.
I can't use the money out of those utility funds for anything other than those utilities.
Even if it was tagged that it's for lawn and leaf pickup, you can't make.
We
that
could
as a
probably put it on a
section.
tax bill in some way, shape or form as a special assessment, sure. I mean, there are alternatives, yes.
That might be one way to keep that and make us, and be a small impact on everybody and just keep that.
Ultimately, to keep any of these things, we have to find a way to raise revenue, so that's, you know.
How do you differentiate between the special assessment and assessing a tax?
Special assessment is for one specific thing.
So we would be within our right to charge a special assessment for leaf and brush pickup?
Yes.
It's kind of like the DDA does, the $1 a day for the downtown property owners.
If there's 1,300 properties in town, I just did a quick 30,000 divided by that, whatever, it comes to like $1.92 a month. And I don't think anybody would have a problem paying $25 a year to cover for their, to have their leave.
Well, then it should be
Service.
considered. I didn't know the city could do that.
Or even a one-time charge. I don't know if you can do that or not, but
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I know the special assessments are for specific things. I'll say Layton Park wanted sidewalks throughout. And they said, okay, we'll do a special assessment to pay for our sidewalks in our neighborhood. And then once it's done and paid for, it's gone.
Maybe we could run that for a year and then the budget could be reassessed or something.
So if you remember from the revenue presentation a month ago, special assessments, the only way you can institute them is if they increase the overall, theoretically increase the value of a house, the value of a home.
Right.
So in theory, a special assessment for refuse, recycling, brush and leaf pickup would increase the value of someone's home because they don't have litter like leaves and branches all over their yard. They don't have trash or recycling all over their yard. So the idea is, yes, potentially you could get a special assessment out of it. So it is a possibility to go down that route. But we just haven't gone down the route of revenue. I mean, we have to focus right now on the 2022 budget and then talk about, a special assessment takes a couple of hearings. It's a few month process. So council may again decide not to cut the leaf and brush pickup for 2022. It's just a proposed, it's just proposed.
It's all
from us,
proposed
so.
right now.
Good idea, though. Thank you.
Thank you.
A couple things real quick. We could go over this thing for weeks, but we can do that next week. Legal services, you said you're on the high end for things that may end up in court at 120,000 as budgeted for legal.
So we're budgeting the high end because we do have, and it's not a closed session here, there's
Right.
a property line dispute, so that's not,
Right, but
litigated right now.
they're not in court yet, but you're still budgeting for it at 120,000.
Just in case, because you have to budget conservatively.
So cutting leaf pickup for 40,000. To me, that just doesn't make sense to budget legal that's not even in court yet at 120,000, but cut leaf pickup to every single house in the city for 40,000.
So when we budget the legal, the $120,000 is we're budgeting, so council's not surprised as to why, maybe we end up in court now, we're spending $120,000, but we told them we're only gonna spend $50,000 on it. So then we have a general idea of where we may end up.
Yeah, but it's not in court yet. They might not even go to court till 2023. And with these, you said they may end up in court, but they're not.
So we're
there yet.
budgeting because it may end up, so it's not smart to not budget for something that might
I'm
not.
just saying, to pad legal services and cut leaf pickup, just to me seems a little extreme.
I wouldn't call that padding.
Tomato, tomato.
No, not at all.
So you're only about half the town gets leaf pickup anyway.
Yeah.
If you look around in the fall season, there's 7 different lawn companies running around here with machines picking up leaves for.
Some of them.
But some of- a lot of them
There's
just-
another 7 that leave it there for the city to pick
Yeah,
up.
they have that.
Yeah, but I'm saying, it's not just the city picking up leaves around here, so.
There are alternatives.
Yeah, you can take it up to Kiwanis Park, not brush, but take leaves and grass.
A lot of people do.
I do.
Any other citizen comment?
I was just curious, I know this would not help for 2022, but when the Haley amendment was, modification was, what failed this November, last month, is there a possibility of going back to it again for another vote? I think there's gonna be a lot of awareness created by its defeat that budgets have to be cut, things have to, maybe services have to be eliminated. Of course, not trying to attach it to the defeat of the amendment, but is it possible to take it back again for future years? So it's not just one and done.
Yep, we talked about that at the last meeting about looking at rewording any proposed language in the future, but Nick's still waiting to hear back from the state.
We're still waiting.
Just real quick, if you have any questions at all about the budget, our budget, I know I'm a large percentage of it, I would welcome you to come and talk to me. I'm serious, I work hard trying to get that budget, make sure everything's explained, so I would welcome anybody in this room to come and talk to me about our budget, because I know that I'm a large part of it, so. I'd rather have you ask me a question and know the answer than assume something, so that's out there for everybody.
I think you're worth every penny, actually.
But please come and see me, because I'm concerned as well.
Anybody else?
I just want to say, don't forget about the kids.
They never do.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we're gonna need to go into closed session, but really quickly, I'll just mention about the boards and commissions. Redevelopment Ready Communities Committee members, we have those kind of established already. There were different members from different boards. We're still looking for one public member for that, if they want to join that. So we're gonna have our first meeting, Rachel, is that this Friday? For RRC, so most of the members have committed to saying yes, but we're still trying to contact those because it's been a year. Sewer Authority representative, the city of Harbor Springs has 3 representatives on the Sewer Authority. Ed Tim, who's been serving for probably 20 years as one of our representatives, is retiring or resigning at the end of this year. The other 2 representatives are right there, Nick and Matt. And so we're looking for a Sewer Authority representative. It's not the the best smelling location for meetings, but it sounds great. Really, so something about this one is that anyone who lives within 20 miles of Harbor Springs can actually serve on the board. So in case we can't find anyone that's really excited about it in the city limits, we can look outside the city limits because our sewer system serves more than just the city limits. And finally, the other boards and commissions, we have maybe 11 plus 4 for the park, so 15 positions to fill in on December 20th for Harbor Commission, Planning Commission, ZDA, DDA, Tree Board, and the Parks Board. So I have about, with people who are reconsidering to stay on board and still keep on serving, plus other interested people, we probably have a good 20, 25 people interested. So we have one last call out for that. So I guess, I know I've heard from council members on what they want to see. They want to see obviously the applications, attendance records of people. So is there anything else you want to see to make your decision, or is that stuff? Good.
You could give us an idea how long people have been on.
Oh, yeah.
That would be great.
Forever.
Take a note of that. All right, city manager report, there's been a bunch of meetings, but that's.
What did you use it?
I think. Close session.
Let's read our verbiage, Jim.
Okay, let's do it.
Thanks.
I would need a motion, verification from
Thanks,
city
everyone.
councilperson to meet in closed session under section 8E of the Open Meetings Act. Specifically, section 8, consult the city attorney regarding trial or settlement strategy in connection with the pending general litigation. The ground that open meeting would have a detrimental effect on the litigating or settlement strategy of the city.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that again. That's what I think that's all. I can read it to you.
Second by Al. All right, roll call. Matt McGarrett.
Yeah.
John Hill.
Yes.
John Cox.
Yep.
Nancy Rondell.
Yes.
Al Dyken.
Very well.
We are in closed session at approximately 4 to 4 in the morning.